Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural meeting of the Japanese edition of the Digital Orthopedics Conference San Francisco, otherwise known as DOCSF. DOCSF was founded in 2017 at the University of California, San Francisco, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. The aim of DOCSF was and continues to be to bridge the worlds of digital innovation and clinical practice with a focus on orthopedics and musculoskeletal care more broadly. We count over 6,000 individuals on our platform called DOCSF 365, and we run several events on that platform, including DOCSF Venture and now DOCSF Japan. We also host a podcast called the Digital Orthopedics Podcast. My name is Dr. Stefano Bini. I am the founder and chair of DOCSF, and I'm also the Maria Manetti-Schremm Endowed Professor of Orthopedic Surgery at the University of California, San Francisco, where I also serve as the department's Chief Innovation Officer. However, I still spend most of my time doing hip and knee replacement surgery. It is my honor to welcome Dr. Junichi Kushioka and Dr. Kazuhito Morioka to our DOCSF family. They are the co-hosts of DOCSF Japan and have been instrumental in bringing our meeting to Japan. Welcome, Dr. Kushioka and Dr. Morioka.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Junichi Kushioka, a postdoc scholar at Stanford Orthopedic Surgery. After coming to Stanford from Osaka, my hometown, I was so surprised that tech companies in the San Francisco Bay Area had shown great interest in healthcare. So medtech and digital are rapidly merging. When I attended DOCSF for the first time last year, I was impressed by how doctors, researchers, and companies discuss the future of medicine from the same perspective in the field of orthopedics, which is my specialty area. Today, we would like to bring the DOCSF to Japan. We want to overcome the barriers between academia and industry, and also between Japan and the US for a better future musculoskeletal care. Kazu, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming here today, everyone. I'm Kazuhito Morioka, Assistant Professor at the UCSF Orthopaedic Surgery. So New Style Orthopedic Conference, DOCSF, was launched in San Francisco 4 years after I moved to the UCSF from Tokyo in 2012. I was very surprised that doctors, researchers, and companies were participating together to create innovations in the musculoskeletal fields. Thereafter, DOCSF has grown into a great influential platform for fostering disruptive technologies. We believe this innovative approach could be a new avenue for developing the orthopedic technologies. We are happy to introduce this interdisciplinary care community to Japan. Thank you.
Thank you both. Absolutely exciting. So we built this event for our audience. What can they expect, Junichi?
Okay, so I'm going to introduce today's schedule in Japanese from now on. So 皆さん、今日はお集まりいただきありがとうございます。本日の4時間のバーチャルイベントのスケジュールを説明させてもらいます。はい、まず今ですね、私と、UCSF の森岡先生と、Dr. ステファーノ・ビーニ、UCSF の、この3人で今、オープニングリマークスをお届けしております。次に、ビーニ先生から、デジタルレボリューション、この MSK っていうのはマスキュロスケルタルケアで、日本語では整形外科とか運動器とか、そのふうに訳しております。このビーニ先生から、デジタルと、運動器、整形外科がどういうふうに融合しているかっていうお話をしていただきます。次に、ファブリツィオ・ビーニ先生、from UCLA から、DOCSF サイエンスということで、サイエンス、科学に重きを置いて、特にエビデンスとかどういうふうに変わったらいいかっていう話をしていただきます。次に、ナンシーさん。ナンシーさんは、整形外科医なんですけれども、彼女自身も、整形外科領域のコンサルティングファームを運営されておりまして、特に、ビジネスサイドの視点から、DOCSF ベンチャーとして、この運動器領域に、どのような投資が今行われているかということのお話をしていただきます。次に、ユニティ・ストークスさん。 彼は、スタートアップヘルスという、スタートアップを支援するようなスタートアップを運営されている方で、特に、今のトレンドですね、今の運動器領域において、どのような、お金の動きとか、投資とか、どんなところがホットなのか、そういったお話をしていただこうと思っております。その後、Q&A セッションがあります。で、Q&A に関しては、後ほどまた説明させてもらいますけれども、チャットボックスの方に何か気になることがあれば、どんどん放り込んでいただけますと、我々がピックアップして、この Q&A セッションの時にお答えしようと思ってますので、気軽に、どんなことでもいいので、話の途中でもどんどん投げていただければと思います。で、その後10分間の休憩を挟みます。次に、ドクター・シーワード・バーバン先生、彼は非常に高名な脊椎外科医の先生で、脊椎外科という、脊椎外科手術ですね、の領域において、どのようなテクノロジーが使われているかというお話をしていただきます。その次に、ストライカーのデジタルやロボティクスの部門長であるロバート・コーヘンさんに、デジタルイノベーションが整形外科の、特に手術領域、インプラントとか、そういった領域において、どのようなことが行われているかという、トレンドと今後の機会についてお話ししていただきます。その後また Q&A を挟みます。今回のメインスポンサーの一つであるニプロさんから、ニプロが今どのようなことをされているのかという紹介をスポンサープレゼンテーションとして行っていただきます。その後また休憩を挟みます。次に、ドクター・ジェフ・ロッツさんですね。ドクター・ジェフ・ロッツは、また非常に有名な、ご高名な研究者で、NIH という、アメリカの、ナショナル・インスティテュー・オブ・ヘルスから、多額の研究支援金をいただいている、もう本当に全米でトップに入る研究者の方です。でその方から、特にこの運動器領域における、ベーシックサイエンスのトレンドについてお話ししていただきます。でその後、デザイン・シンキングですね。皆さん、デザイン・シンキングっていう言葉は、耳にされたことあるかなと思うんですけど、この IDEO っていう会社が、このデザイン・シンキングの伝道師としていろいろ各会社とか、アカデミアとかにいろいろお伝えしているんですけれども、その IDEO からスピーカーを招きまして、このデザイン思考ですね、日本語で言うと。デザイン思考についてどのようにアプライしていったらいいのかっていうのをお話していただきます。で、最後になりますが、UCSF 整形外科のチェアパーソンであるタート・ベール先生から、この整形外科領域における、今後の、イノベーションとか、どのようなコラボレーションしていったらいいかっていうのをお話をしていただきます。で、また Q&A を挟みまして、最後、クロージングリマークで終わりしたいと思っております。これが一番大事なことなんですけれど、とにかくご質問がありましたら、お気軽にチャットボックスに質問を投げてください。我々が拾って Q&A セッションでお答えしますので、どんな些細なことでもいいので、Q&A、クエスチョンを投げていただければ幸いです。
はい。この最新の講演を通じてですね、皆様にこの運動器領域の新しいアプローチをですね、ぜひ知っていただいて、楽しんでいただければ幸いです。で、改めまして、DOCSF JAPAN の開催にあたり、日本を代表する企業様、そして政府機関様からご支援をいただいて開催することができました。スポンサーとして、株式会社ニプロ様、株式会社ニューベイシブジャパン様、デロイト・トーマツコンサルティング合同会社様、この度は多大なるご支援をいただき、ありがとうございました。また、独立行政法人日本貿易振興機構テトロサンフランシスコ事務所様、社団法人海外日本人研究者ネットワーク UJA 様、国立研究開発法人科学技術振興機構様、CIC ジャパン合同会社様にはサポーターとしてご協力いただき、誠にありがとうございます。そして開催にあたり、ご尽力いただきました DOCSF メンバーの皆様にもこの場をお借りして、運営メンバー一同心より感謝を申し上げます。支援いただきました皆様のご期待に添えるよう、今後も日米のですね、架け橋として整形外科領域の発展に尽力してまいります。今後とも末永いお力添えをいただきますよう、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
はい、では早速始めさせていただきます。最初のスピーカーは、ドクター・ステファーノ・ビーニ先生で、この DOCSF のファウンダーでもあり、UCSF の、CTO として、いろんなテクノロジーを UCSF の整形外科にアプライしている方になります。 で、Dr. Bini に、Drivers of Change and the Digital Revolution in MSK ということで、運動器領域、整形科領域において、どのようなデジタルトレンドが今来ているのかとか、今後変化していくためにはどのようなマインドセットを持ったらいいのか、そのような話をしていただくことになります。で、私も非常に楽しみにしてもらっています。Dr. Bini 先生、よろしくお願いします。Please go ahead, Dr. Bini. Thank you.
Hello again. If you missed the introductions and you're just joining us now, I am Stefano Bini. I'm the chair and founder of the Digital Orthopaedics Conference in San Francisco. Delighted to be here on the first DOCSF Japan. I will be talking to you about the drivers of change in the digital revolution in orthopedic surgery. These are my conflicts. None of them are relevant today. My outline is that we'll show some examples of AI-driven technologies in musculoskeletal care, and then why I think the change is inevitable. But first, if you don't believe me that artificial intelligence is the most important thing out there for us to be considering, listen instead to Satya Nadella, the chairman.
The world is experiencing a surge in digital adoption like never before. Digital transformation that was projected to happen over the next 10 years is happening today. It is sweeping every country, every sector, and every organization. This transformation includes rapid advances in AI, which will have an enormous impact on augmenting human capability in healthcare and beyond. AI is technology's most important priority and healthcare its most urgent application.
And healthcare, its most urgent application. So I agree. So what is artificial intelligence? I'm going to be very brief about this. It comes into this hierarchy of artificial intelligence, as you see in this paper. It starts with algorithms and ends with artificial neural networks. Now, artificial neural networks is three basic types. There are classic ANNs, or artificial neural networks, that are very good at solving complex problems. There's convolutional neural networks, which solve computer vision related problems, so the computer can see pixels and visual data. And there's recurrent neural networks, which are best adapted to natural language and finding meaning in text or speech. And we'll see how each of these technologies can be applied to the world of orthopedic surgery. So clinical decision support systems are quite popular conceptually. They're starting to get quite good. These are classic ANNs. They use knowledge-based or rules-driven machine learning to analyze clinical data, very good at looking into charts, and also can be used to create coding algorithms. This is more of a visual CNN type problem where we're using holograms to recreating these visual affects. I'm actually literally moving around that little box you see there and creating a hologram with my iPhone of this three-dimensional image created from a CT scan. We can use similar technology to enable computers to look at a patient as it does the therapy and accurately measure limb motion. We can use virtual reality in a gamified environment where the patient is playing a game, but in the process of playing the game is doing physical therapy. We're seeing more of that. I'm very excited about the opportunities of augmented reality. I'm sure we'll hear more about it. On the left, you're seeing the trauma case with the bones projected onto the field of view, along with the blood vessels and nerves that the doctor has to avoid. On the right, you see the placement of a pedicular screw fixation only with direct vision, no CT scans, no MRIs. Camera vision coupled to artificial intelligence tools can do interesting things that track a hospital, an operating room, instruments and needles. You can also track how surgeons do in surgery and help them optimize their workflows. Interesting, fascinating stuff that's happening in the world of camera vision, where cameras can now look at very, very small surface areas, collect as many as 1 million data points that are super accurate, and from that actually reconstruct an entire bone or sequence of bones like in the spine. We're using virtual reality to help with evaluation of surgical technique. We can also teach surgical technique, remind people what to do by having this work happen in a virtual environment. We're also having some very interesting algorithms that can actually replicate a three-dimensional model from 2D images that are orthogonal and 90 degrees to each other, and with the same accuracy or similar accuracy to a CT scan. Another place where we're seeing recurrent neural networks working is in voice-enabled virtual scribes that bring us ambient computing, where the AI is happening in the world around us, specifically in this case with conversational artificial intelligence that can listen into the conversation that is happening between any number of people, differentiate who's speaking, and create a clinic note from that information. We'll see a lot more in this space as Microsoft just invested, I think, $10 billion in Nuance to help support their development in their clinical offerings. This is a fascinating technology. It uses and couples artificial intelligence and voice recognition software, as well as visual camera recognition software to look at the face of the patient, listen to their voice for their anxiety, perhaps, and then change the face of the avatar as she speaks and interfaces with the patient. So here's what that looks like.
I can see you and hear you. And what makes me different is that I can respond to your emotions. I guess you could say I'm putting a human face on artificial intelligence.
Wow. Wow is right. And that technology has only gotten better since we made that change. Now, why are we going to adopt this technology? Well, I'd argue that, you know, even though people say, look, the technology is great, it's super expensive, our current model is great. I want to see my doctor. I want to touch my knee, touch my shoulder. I don't like the idea of this happening through technology. I'm not saying that that is not true. This is a great model, but that's the wrong question. The question is not whether this is a great model. The question is whether or not we can afford it. Is it scalable? Do we have enough doctors, enough resources to make that happen? Excuse me. Well, at this point, healthcare costs are growing as a percent of GDP. This graph on the left is Japan. The red line is GDP. The black line is a growth in cost. The green line on the right is the United States cost compared to the rest of the planet, and this continues to be a problem. This is data from Japan. You're seeing the increase per person healthcare costs keep going up, as does the aging population, which is the black box to the right. And what you're seeing is that that black box to the right is very important in Japan because the amount of money spent per person per year is approximately 4 times as much, 3 to 4 times as much if people are over 75. It also turns out to be as much as between 5 and 15% of people's annual income in Japan. In the United States, it's as high as 30% of people's income wind up going to healthcare expenditures. So the problem is not really who's going to pay for this fancy technology, is that who's going to pay for today's technology, which isn't actually delivering care to our patients. Not only that, it's becoming very, very difficult for our doctors because they're working tremendous number of hours. In Japan, I understand that 42% of physicians will work more than 200 hours per week. And I'd argue that's not sustainable, and it's unlikely they can actually deliver great care with so little time off for themselves and for sleep. On top of that, you're having the issue that the medical knowledge is doubling every 73 days. It's doubling every 73 days. How can we possibly keep up with that much information? We need computers to help us with that. There's also a change in generations that have different expectations, both of themselves, of their society, and also of the healthcare system. I want to remind you that technological revolutions sometimes take a while, but inevitably happen. In 1800, food production required 70% of European workers to make the food for the world. It was a low productivity per capita. It was unequally distributed cost and revenue. The technology was very low tech and back-breaking work. Sounds like healthcare today. Keep in mind that by 2022, only 1% of workers still live on a farm, and this was all changed and enabled by technology, both biotechnology and mechanical technology. Of course, now we have so much food that we have an obesity epidemic, and that 30% of the food produced in the world is never eaten Too bad it's not better distributed, but it is a stark contrast to what we were 100 years ago. Of course, technology is moving much, much faster than it was then. The solutions are getting more accurate and better. There are massive financial pressures for us to deliver better care. And of course, as I see here, there are massive social drivers of change. So thank you very much. I look forward to the rest of the conversation we'll have for the rest of the day today at here, the first annual DOCSF Japan. So thank you.
Greetings. Honor and very excited to be here at DOCSF Japan. My name is Fabrizio Billi. I'm a professor in the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery at the University of California, Los Angeles, co-chair of DOCSF 2023 and director of DOCSF Science. Excited to present you DOCSF Science. Launched last year, DOCSF Science focuses on presenting scientific evidence to support the advancement in digital healthcare, particularly as it pertains to orthopedics. But DOCSF Science is so much more than a scientific symposium within the main meeting. The program is set up as a super-powered journal club. It covers a range of topics, including, but not limited, to artificial intelligence and machine learning, sensors and wearables, extended reality, 3D printing, robotics, asynchronous telemedicine, rehabilitation, and more. Technologies are advancing at a very fast pace. Their implementation as a novel treatment and procedures require careful evaluation through evidence-based research and protocols that possibly have still to be perfected. But even when studies are conducted rigorously, the wider adoption of digital technologies remain a challenge, and novel, more pragmatic approaches are needed. DOCSF Science explored the evidence behind these technologies and in a very engaging fashion present them to you. More importantly, DOCSF Science gives you an opportunity to witness and be part of the process through which our experts evaluate these technologies. As more technological tools merge together, our understanding of the environment in which they operate, as well as their efficacy and specific applicability, becomes suddenly very difficult and very complex. And so does the associated literature and body of scientific evidence. Let's imagine to understand how the merge of wearable sensor and virtual reality could be used in developing digital twins. Let's also imagine that our ultimate goal is to use these digital twins to improve patient management. Now, navigating the complexity of these different technologies here involved is already a big challenge. But even more challenging is to understand how these technologies should be validated and to comprehend if the data presented and available in the literature support their implementation. And even when things seem simpler, the reality is that complexity just lies below the surface. Let's examine as an example how complex is the integration of wearable sensors into clinical use. Wearable systems have been around for some time, allowing to measure a whole variety of health parameters. For motion analysis, they typically consist of small sensors designed to measure 3D linear and angular acceleration. Complex algorithms then take those signals to compute functional outcome measures which characterize human movement. However, several problems arise from the use of wearables, especially when they come to movement or gait analysis in patients. One current issue is that there is no consensus for best algorithm to calculate the outcomes, as various algorithms are optimized for different sensor or sensors placement and different activities. It is commonly accepted that in order to test a specific pathologic population, the error for the data collection system must be lower than the expected difference between the pathologic and the healthy population. However, for gait analysis, the expected difference from normative data differs from one pathology to another. Therefore, a wearable measurement system needs to be validated not only for the intent testing protocol, but also for the intended test population. Meaning that we cannot simply assume that the set of sensors and algorithms validated for a specific pathology can be used for a different one. To complicate our understanding of what can or cannot be adopted for clinical use, the amount of literature that we might need to consult is simply massive. If you run a Google search using digital health and orthopedics as keywords, you get almost 17,000 hits, and that's only for the papers published in the last year. We know how difficult and time-consuming the process of searching the most significant papers and understanding the associated scientific complexity can be. At DOCSF Science, we do the work for you, choosing the most impactful and groundbreaking research papers published in the last year. Our team of experts reads hundreds of papers and select only the top 2%. We summarize them and we present them to you in a highly engaging format where we critically discuss methods and findings live in front of you, bringing on the stage renowned scientists and prominent orthopedic surgeons. This gives you the chance to hear comments from different perspectives, scientific and medical. And we do it by getting immediately to the point, without distraction or superfluous details. But don't take my words for it. Here is an example from the panel at DOCSF Science last year.
The next paper is a little different, if you want, is the use of synthetic IMU signals in the training of deep learning models significantly improves the accuracy of joint kinematic predictions. So the objective of this paper was to develop a methodology to generate synthetic kinematic and associated predicted IMU signals. The train a neural network uses synthetic data to predict 3 degrees of freedom joint rotations of the hip and the knee during gait. So let's get to the meat of it.
Here's the way I understand it. This is really not my wheelhouse. And I know Stefano loves this stuff, sitting next to a real expert here. The way people walk matters. People walk a lot of different ways. And if you have a condition like arthritis or a tendon tear or some other movement disorder, you're going to walk differently. And that's really valuable information. And the way that traditionally you'd get that is you bring someone over to a human performance lab, gait lab, got all these things that I don't understand, and they watch them walk and yada, yada, yada. It's expensive. It's kind of clunky. It's great for research, but it's not great for clinical work. So what folks are doing, Stefano, this guy over here, can you use sensors? And I won't steal the thunder on sensors. But getting the data from the sensors to then map that to something meaningful about gait, that's all great. It's hard to get the data, and it's a common problem in all of machine learning is like you need a ton of data. So what do you do? And I'll hand it over to Tom, and I want you to explain how this isn't cheating.
Well, so this is also a really great paper, which is why we selected it. It's not cheating to create synthetic data sets. Actually, I'm a big fan of synthetic data sets, and this paper it really exemplifies why everyone should be. I have been guilty of having a very small data size before. This study only had 30 individuals, from which they had several thousand strides that they were studying. In the end, what they did is they had 3 individuals that they used as a testing set, which is also very small, right? But they have many, many strides that you can understand in those 3 individuals. So that being said, that this data set itself suffers from lack of data. This is very common. And like I said, I've done similar things in the past too in my research. And what's really nice with this paper is that they used machine and deep learning models to predict joint and hip kinematics. And what they showed is that if you use just the real data or just synthetic data, meaning they sort of warped it in certain ways to make it look a little bit different than the original data set, or if you use real data and synthetic data together, actually the best performing machine learning model is using real data and fake data together. This is sort of the concept behind bootstrapping, right? So if you don't have enough data, you make up a bunch of data that looks like your data. And this, in the field of computer science and machine learning, is known to increase your performance. And this is what this is, right? It's just making up a bunch of data that helps you increase performance. But what's really nice about synthetic data is that you don't have to give up your data. And your synthetic data, once you make it, can be non-PHI data because it's all synthetic and fake, right? So institutions that previously couldn't collaborate together can now join their synthetic data sets together and make larger and larger data sets, right? So, and that's why I like this paper, is because it's showing that if you have synthetic data, even from your own data set, it can increase your performance. So imagine now having data from other collaborators who don't necessarily want to share their data, but you can take their synthetic data and increase your machine learning model performance. This is going to get really big in the future. This is the whole concept behind electronic health records not being able to be shared between institutions, and you can make synthetic data sets. And this is sort of a way that they've done it by making a way to warp and represent the data in different ways to make synthetic data sets, which has been successful in this paper.
Not cheating.
Not cheating.
Well, synthetic data is also very used in the pharma industry to create what they are now doing with in silico trials. So they are scanning for the best drugs before investing a lot of money into real clinical data. So did you guys remember to vote and express your comments before we move to a discussion, a more general discussion?
Actually, I'll add one thing if you don't mind,
No,
because it
absolutely.
segues, I think it dovetails with what Tom was saying, is that I think so many of these problems, it does come down to a team science approach. There's just not going to be enough data unless you come up with clever ways to work together. Federated learning being another approach to that, where you don't have to mix the data. Very complicated, very difficult, can't pretend to understand it, but it seems like a reasonable thing. Talk to Tom about it.
But discussing the papers in this hyperdynamic format is just one part of DOCSF science. Our team of experts leverage on those papers, and that takes you into a broader discussion on the specific topic. Let's listen to it.
In a perfect world where I see myself with robotics, I think there is, number one, we have to define the target. I think we need to prove that robots are accurate. And then we can change the implant design. Currently all the implants that are used on the market are 10 years or older of the 4 top companies. And the reason why we don't change the implant is because it's very costly. And so can we develop a system where you can get a preoperative CAT scan in the clinic, you can optimize the surgical plan for that particular patient that is based on their activity level, their alignment, and their needs. You can then 3D print an implant in your back office, sterilize it, and then use a robot to implant it, and then 2 weeks later they can run marathons. That's what I envision will happen, and I hope we get there.
Perfect. Jennifer.
I'm going to come see you in like 60 years. So I can run a marathon. I think there's a few different pieces of this to take apart, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, the idea of like the surgical app store, right? And so how do we get there? How do we get to kind of the broader field of medicine and looking at robots that have utility across clinical service lines? But then before we get there, we have to think about the healthcare economics piece, because there's different modalities that companies use to sell into the health system. Okay, the robot's going to come for free. It's going to be a leasing model. It's going to be a big CapEx up front. And I think that's going to continue to change and evolve as I see colleagues from ortho spine coming and say, you won't say the name, but so-and-so is giving us the robot for free. Okay, well, what does that mean? And does that mean there's a healthcare economics component here or not? But going back to what you said, Stefan, I think was really interesting in terms of 3D printing in the back office. And there's companies taking off different pieces of that. I think about Carlsmed, they're based down in Southern California, right? They're 3D printing the spine implant, they're doing the preoperative planning, they're sending that personalized implant to the surgeon. And then pushing that a little bit further, and then this goes back to a little bit of that real world evidence piece that maybe we can link back to that robotic surgical environment in terms of what Canary Medical is doing with the tibial implant sensor with the Zimmer knee, the Persona IQ, right? And so when I look at that field of data and we're starting to be able to close the loop from the personalized implant to the real world evidence that's gonna be collected after the implant, again, does that data that we talked about that was incremental earlier all of a sudden become transformational because I'm getting those early real world evidence gate, whatever it is, following the surgical procedure.
Terrific dynamics there. We live in a world where technological advancement, especially in digital healthcare, is moving at an ever faster pace. DOCSF Science does it too. New for this year, we will have a poster session dedicated to the very latest development in digital technology and most likely still unpublished. We will focus on a few topics, more specifically sensors to track outcomes, AI-assisted risk assessment, chatbots for clinical decision support, patient engagement, and education, cobots, asynchronous telemedicine, and others. I sincerely hope that you will consider joining us and submitting your latest work. Your poster could be selected for an award this year presented in collaboration with the Orthopaedic Research and Education Foundation, REF. The best poster papers will also have an opportunity to be included into DOCSF proceedings that will be published into the Journal of Orthopedic Experience and Innovation, now official journal for DOCSF. There are many reasons to attend DOCSF, and certainly many more to consider submitting your research to DOCSF Science. I hope to see you in May. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Welcome to all of you in the DOCSF Japan audience. I'm Nancy Lynch, and I am the director of DOCSF Venture. Additionally, I'm an orthopedic surgeon who has also worked as a venture capitalist and an executive within startup companies. Most of my professional time is spent working with clinical stage companies that are developing and delivering products for the orthopedics market, particularly those companies conducting clinical trials. My job today is to take you on a whirlwind tour of the investment activity that is in the process of transforming musculoskeletal care. This same analysis was delivered in January during our DOCSF Venture event on the eve of the annual JP Morgan conference in San Francisco. I divide this talk into two segments. The first is a very quick review of current venture investment trends across the entire spectrum of healthcare. The second segment will provide you an in-depth look at the venture investments in the digital orthopedic musculoskeletal care space. After doing this review, it's very clear to me that these investment trends are forecasting a revolution in musculoskeletal care. First, the quick review or overview. Early in January 2023, Silicon Valley Bank published its annual report for healthcare investments and exits in 2022. In that report, they provide a lot of information, interesting information, but we will not get into most of it. However, the first 3 slides in this presentation are data directly from that report. So to set the stage for this whole talk, it's important to understand how much money US venture capital firms are raising to make their investments, how much money these investment firms actually have to deploy. Fundraising by US venture capital funds investing in healthcare has been exploding over the last decade. It's interesting to look back to a profound low point in fundraising and to compare it to today. Without this perspective, it's hard to fathom how dramatically different the financing environment is today versus a decade ago. Although 2021 was an anomaly, even 2022 fundraising exceeded that of 2020. In other words, VCs continue to attract the interest of institutional investors, or what we call limited partners, despite some economic uncertainty in the current time. And thus, VCs have a lot of money to deploy or put to work, or what we call dry powder. Similar to the amount of fundraising VCs have been doing, the investments they've made over the last 5 years have steadily increased across all of healthcare. Biotech is driving much of that growth, but health tech is contributing as well. The pandemic definitely boosted investments in diagnostics and tools, but that's leveled off some with the receding of the pandemic. In contrast, medical device investing has remained fairly stable and perhaps even stagnant over the same period of time. No surprise to any of you, 2021's frenzied investment pace was not replicated in 2022, but the total amount of invested dollars was still more in 2022 than it was in 2020. Since our focus today is on digital health, let's look a little bit closer at the Silicon Valley Bank's health tech numbers, specifically this part of the graph that I've highlighted. The data you see here is the exact same health tech data shown on the previous slide, but with the total number of deals added. Although the total investment dollar amount diminished a fair bit from 2021 to 2022, the total number of deals noted on the y-axis on the right side of the graph, the total number of deals getting funded is still very high. One more perspective on the health tech investment space comes from Rock Health, and this information is from their year-end report as well. The average deal size by series declined somewhat in 2022, but this essentially corrected to a more normal average deal size for Series C and Series D. 2021 really was an anomaly. That was a fast look at venture investments in the healthcare space. All of that information is publicly available from Silicon Valley Bank and Rock Health's websites. To sum it up, a lot of dollars are available to be invested. Digital health technology is receiving an increasing share of those investment dollars. There has been a pullback in the market from 2021, but the overall trajectory for health tech investments is still upward. In this next segment, we'll take a close look at the venture investment trends in the digital ortho MSK sector. But before I share that data, I want to let you know I have a methodology for collecting and analyzing this data. I don't have time to share that methodology in detail with you, but suffice it to say, this data represents equity investments of any size in private companies that were publicly reported from 2018 to 2022. It does not include IPOs, M&A activity, SPACs, or internal company investments. So just equity investments. It also represents technologies that have an MSK or musculoskeletal care application to facilitate MSK care in some way. One of the filters I apply when determining whether a company is entered into the analysis is the relevance of the company's technology to an orthopedic surgeon's practice, even if we surgeons don't use the technologies ourselves. I do exclude dental, maxillofacial, and veterinary and a few other types of investments. In this analysis, I also distinguish digital versus other types of investments. When I collect the data for this analysis and categorize it, I focus on whether software or analytics are used in a significant way. And finally, if it is, I then include that deal in the digital category. Finally, this isn't a typical investment analyst view of the world. It's a very clinically based analysis. So based on my analysis, over the last 5 years, $9.6 billion in equity-based healthcare venture investments have been made in the MSK space, both digital health and non-digital health, which is mostly device-type technologies. In 2021, $3.4 billion went into this whole space, compared to $46 billion for all of health tech and med device, which is data I showed in the prior section. So about 8% of the venture investments that took place in 2021 were in MSK. And for comparison, it was 7% in 2022. Some mega deals over $100 million, are definitely skewing this analysis, particularly in 2021. So I took the liberty of eliminating the mega deals across the MSK sector for a bit more fair look at the space. Here are those mega deals that I removed. Most are deals in the digital MSK care space. Notably, Hinge Health garnered 2 mega investments in 2021. So even after eliminating those handful of mega deals from the analysis, 2021 was still a very big year for investments in MSK technologies, coming in at $1.8 billion. And that is for digital and non-digital technologies. 2022 was essentially on par with 2019 and 2020. 2021, again, was an anomaly. Now, although I took the mega deals out of the analysis for this slide, the rest of the graphs you're about to see will still include those mega deals. When it comes to deal size or the number of dollars raised in an investment round, unlike the broader health tech space, small dollar deals in digital MSK are trending downward, but mid-sized deals are trending upward. A similar pattern exists for all of the other or MSK deals, which are generally speaking conventional medical devices or orthobiologics, meaning a trend downward for the small dollar deals and a trend upward for the mid-sized deals. So now that you know how much money is going into this space, I bet you want to know what technologies those dollars are actually funding. The $9.6 billion invested in all of ortho MSK can be divided up into 4 categories across the entire MSK care space. 80% of that $9.6 billion of investment went into the first 2 categories, ortho facilitative ancillary and focused ortho spine technologies. Some examples of ancillary technologies such as imaging, pain management, and rehab, and the focused orthospine category, implants, navigation, orthobiologics, are listed out to the side. Looking at the dollars in this way, though, can be misleading. So let's look at the same pie chart in the same categories, but separate the MSK digital health investments from all other ortho MSK investments. I think the contrast is interesting. So for the digital MSK investments, the ortho facilitative ancillary technology category, which includes a lot of imaging and rehab technologies, jumps from 44% to 58%, while focused ortho spine drops from 36% to just 20% of the digital health venture investments. This suggests most of the funded technologies are not yet directly applicable to operative procedures or used by surgeons in preparation for operative cases. Some are, such as imaging technologies and some augmented reality, but a lot are not. Virtual rehab, for instance, which is responsible for some of those mega deals in the past few years, is something that doesn't take place in the operating room and isn't usually offered directly by an orthopedic surgeon. Now, for reference, although we're not going to go into detail on this, I am including some examples of one of the other categories, platform technologies, out to the side. Now, in contrast, 3/4 of the non-digital health or conventional MSK investments are technologies that can be applied directly in the operating room. It's no surprise to see conventional implants and orthobiologics as the primary focus of these investments. The more conventional ancillary technologies make up roughly 20% of these non-digital investments. I like to look at this another way as well. I find it interesting to consider these investments by application or specialty. Let me point out these 2 pie charts represent different dollar amounts. MSK Digital Health received $6 billion in investments over the last 5 years, where all other MSK technologies received $3.6 billion in investments over the same time frame. Specialty-specific technologies, meaning technologies aimed directly at arthroplasty surgeons or spine surgeons or sports surgeons or even trauma surgeons, are a small minority of investments in the MSK digital health space. And that makes some sense. Digital technologies tend to have uses that span specialties, and many of these technologies are being used outside of the operating room altogether. But in contrast, for non-digital technologies, the pie chart on the right, specialty specificity is more common, especially in spine, as is a discrete application like orthobiologics. Now, when analyzing the MSK digital health investments by technology type, and as a caveat, to be honest, it is hard to assign a single technology type to these investments because many of these products utilize more than one technology. But when AI as the underlying technology is considered, more than half of the investments in this space have gone to AI enabling approaches to care. Now, as a reminder, this slide only includes digital MSK investments. It doesn't include any of the more conventional or other technologies that you've seen on some of the prior slides. Additionally, while not all the technologies here are related to the technical performance of surgery, some are. They represent at least 23% of the investments over the last 5 years. But again, the influence of mega deals in remote care is skewing this percentage downward. The actual dollar amount for this group of technologies, the ones related to the technical performance of surgery, is going up over time, and I believe that trend will continue. As a way to conclude, I'm displaying the top 6 digital MSK technologies receiving funding in each of the past 5 years. Their rank order, top to bottom, is 1st through 6th. And the technologies are color-coded to highlight trends for each technology over time. For instance, AI-guided clinical decision-making is always dark blue, and you can see that trend over the last 5 years. In each year, at least 3 of the 6 most funded MSK digital health technologies are AI-enabled, whether it be clinical decision-making, workflow, or engagement platforms, or other non-surgical treatment technologies. The enormous amount of funding into patient engagement platforms in 2021 is really driven by essentially one company. Were it not for that company, Hinge Health, it's likely that AI-guided clinical decision-making technologies would be in the #1 spot again for 2021. As I hinted on the previous slide, surgical technologies used directly by orthopedic surgeons, are starting to see more funding than they have in the prior 4 years. And I just have to remind you one more time, this is simply a review of the equity investments in this space. It does not take into consideration IPOs, SPACs, M&As, and internal corporate investments. So the analysis underrepresents the total dollars that are funding this space. And it definitely underestimates the real enthusiasm for the future of digital technologies in MSK care. There is no doubt digital health technologies are disrupting the current MSK care delivery models in many ways. Based on the amount of money being deployed by investors, venture capitalists are betting on that disruption being successful. I appreciate being able to share this data with you, and I hope it gives you insight into the robust investment world for technologies focused on musculoskeletal care. Please feel free to contact me with any questions you might have. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of DOCSF Japan.
Hello, my name is Junichi Stokes. It is such an honor to be here at DOCSF Japan with all of you. Today, we are going to talk about why I believe now is an extraordinary opportunity to invest in the MSK market, and specifically the world of innovation and health technology within MSK. Again, my name is Junichi Stokes. I am the co-founder and president of an organization called Startup Health. We are the world's first and largest ecosystem dedicated to achieving global health moonshots. And we have the world's largest portfolio of digital health and health technology companies. We have almost 500 investments from 29 countries around the world. So I have a really exciting opportunity to learn and see firsthand what's going on from the world of startups, from entrepreneurs, and at early stage investing. And really what I'd like to talk about today is 5 unique macro conditions that are converging that I believe are very significant to the world of MSK and the opportunity to invest in musculoskeletal innovation as it relates to health, wellness, and healthcare. The first is we're really living in a moment of great change. Starting the last 3 years, the era of pandemic, a global pandemic, but also other really exciting transformation happening around regulatory changes around the world, as well as rapid change around business models. So this changing environment is creating a new moment of opportunity for innovators. But this is happening for the second reason, or second macro condition, which is an extraordinary increase in demand for solutions to help with mobility because of an aging population. There's an increasing demand for new solutions in the market of MSK. We have an aging population around the world. We have the need for more and more people to age in place. And really, this increase in demand as a result of rising costs in healthcare, but also an aging population, is really creating a great need for new innovation in MSK. Well, the good news is another important macro condition is we're living in the world of exponential technologies. There's a great transformation happening with digital health. There's extraordinary innovation happening in biotech. We're living in an AI revolution. There's extraordinary new tools around virtual reality or VR, augmented reality or AR, machine learning, 5G, quantum computing, the data revolution, and all sorts of APIs or ways for innovators to plug into these new technologies and leverage these new technologies. So we have great change, we have demand for innovation. At the same time, we have exponential innovation occurring with technology. Two other very important fundamental conditions happening. First, this is happening globally. It's not just happening here in Silicon Valley where I am today. It's happening all over the world, in places like Japan, but all over the world. There's at least 40 or 50 extraordinary new health tech hubs around the world where we're seeing opportunities to invest in innovators and in technology and great startups that are emerging all over the world. And that leads specifically to the fifth condition, which is we really are living in the global age or golden age of entrepreneurship, where there's more founders, there's more startups today than there were 10 years ago, which means there's more opportunities to invest specifically at the early stage. So a changing environment, increased demand for innovation, extraordinary exponential technologies. This is happening all over the world at a time when there's an influx of entrepreneurs and innovators. So when you mix all of these conditions together, it really is, I believe, one of the most exciting times in history to invest in the landscape of MSK, which happens to be one of the largest sectors of the healthcare market. Greater than, I think, close to 70% of the spend within the United States, for example, is around issues of mobility, MSK, musculoskeletal, pain management. So it is a very vast market opportunity and something that I think is only growing. I'd like to talk a little bit now about the future. So if these are the 5 conditions where we are today, I think there is a really exciting trend happening where there's different innovation layers today that are also converging. So for example, there's extraordinary innovation happening from a medical perspective. in the world of biotech, in the world of science, in the world of medicine. So one innovation layer is the medical, scientific, biotech, and life science revolution that's happening. Another very important innovation layer has to do with big data, with analytics, with how data is being used to really predict changes in the future, how it's being used within machine learning and within AI. We're also witnessing an extraordinary layer of innovation around hardware, things like material design. That's why we're seeing a robotics revolution. So when you start to consider the innovation layers happening in medicine and in biotech, with the world of big data, with the world of hardware, and then look also what we're seeing in terms of software innovation, the world of AI, machine learning, very, very rapid innovation happening because of the world of AI today. And you then consider other types of innovation that are entering the landscape, specifically around business model innovation. How do you price new innovation? How do you sell new innovation? What are the business models of who is paying for these health technologies? Who is going to pay for these new services? So I believe when you look at the investment market today, or really over the next 10 years, it's significantly different than the last 10 years, because many of these innovation layers are converging together to create new opportunities that weren't previously even imagined. So at the early stage, we're seeing a wave of opportunity in new ideas, new companies being formed that are completely different than even 3 or 4 years ago. And then the final thing I will mention is specifically, we've seen through history why markets like we're seeing today, where it's been very, very active. In fact, when we started Startup Health 12 years ago, there was less than $1 billion a year in venture funding in terms of early stage health innovation. Now today, we're seeing more than $40 billion a year being invested at the early stage of health innovation globally. But more recently, over the past 6 months, we've seen this cool off. We've seen the stock market go down. We've seen the crypto market go down. We've seen many investors and many funds slow down their pace of innovation, primarily though at the later stages. So Series B and later in the venture capital markets, we are still seeing a lot of activity at the seed stage and very early stage, where many of these new ideas are emerging, where many of these new companies are emerging. And we've also seen in history that many of the great waves of innovation, of transformative exponential innovation, happens in markets like this, where there's a down market. So if you look at 2000 to 2003, where great companies like Google emerged, or you look at the many companies that emerged after 2008, and that's when Facebook and many of the social companies or companies like Uber emerged. It's in markets that give new opportunity for new emerging innovation to make its way out into the world. And what we believe is that over the next 3 to 4 years is going to be an extraordinary opportunity for transformative innovation to start to emerge in a way it was not getting the ability to do so over the past 5 to 10 years. So in conclusion, we believe it's really a unique moment in history to invest in early stage health innovation. The musculoskeletal market is one of the largest investment opportunities as a market category in the whole world. And we're living in an extraordinary dynamic time because of these converging macro trends around the changing landscape, the increasing demand, the exponential technology and innovation, how this is happening globally, and this wave of golden age of entrepreneurs and builders that are all coming into the market at a time when the market is ready for new opportunities. So you can learn more about Startup Health at startuphealth.com. If you have questions, feel free to email me or find me at Twitter at Unity Stokes. And I welcome the opportunity to meet you and hopefully come to Japan soon on a next visit to learn more about the early stage innovation ecosystem in your region. Thank you so much. Again, it's an honor to be here at DOCSF Japan. Thank you.
はい、次は、シグワード・バーバン先生に登場していただきます。このバーバン先生は世界的に高名な脊椎外科医でありまして、UCSF の脊椎外科部門のチーフをされております。バーバン先生はもう素晴らしいご経歴をお持ちで、まずはスタンフォード大学でバイオロジーを学び、その後オックスフォード大学で哲学、政治、経済学を専攻された後、ハーバードメディカルスクールで MD を取得されています。その後、ハーバード大学で整形外科のレジデントを行い、UCSF やボストン小児病院において脊椎外科のフェローをされて、現在に至っております。このバーバン先生は脊椎外科領域において、非常に先端的なテクノロジーをいろいろと用いられておりまして、本日はそのさまざまな先端技術のお話を伺えることを私自身も楽しみにしております。それではバーバン先生、よろしくお願いします。
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the first Digital Orthopedic Conference in Japan. My name is Sigurd Bourbon. I'm a spine surgeon at UCSF, and I've got a strong interest in digital technologies, as well as the new and advanced technologies in spine surgery. And that's going to be the topic of my talk for this session, specifically to review advanced technologies in spine surgery. And what I'll focus on is precision medicine and the use of precision medicine to really guide appropriate care for individual patients. These are my disclosures, and none of these relationships with industry have anything to do with any of the topics that I'll be speaking on today, and none of the technologies are specific to any of the companies with whom I've consulted. As an overview, I'll start with the observation that approaches to the management of spinal disorders really are characterized by significant variability. And that variability exists between small regions as well as internationally. Some of the advanced technologies in spine surgery that are most interesting encompass robotics and navigation, minimally invasive approaches to the spine, including non-fusion surgery, and the use of artificial intelligence and precision medicine in empowering informed choice for the individual. The focus of my talk today is going to be the use of precision medicine tools to empower informed decision-making. I think it's important to recognize that evidence-based approaches to spinal disorders may be the most appropriate when we're using tools of precision health, and specifically applying the right treatment to the right patient. Spinal disorders really are characterized by significant variation, both in rates of surgery as well as types of surgery. And this variation can be seen between regions within the US as well as internationally. So whether that might be a common problem like a degenerative spondylolisthesis, or a more complex problem like an adult spinal deformity, the variation of approaches is broad. Approaches may include non-operative management, including pain medications, physical therapy, bracing, neuromodulation, interventional options, including injections, or a broad spectrum of operative options that may include fusion, decompression alone, or motion-preserving type procedures. To some extent in spine surgery, the large number of specialists involved, as well as the heterogeneity of patient presentations, are what drive this diversity. When we empower and informed choice for the management of spinal disorders really requires information that's often not available. Specifically, we want valid information on the natural history, what's likely to happen if nothing's done, as well as valid information on the outcomes of both operative and non-operative options. Outcomes include the risks and potential complications of care, the costs of care, as well as the expected benefits of care. And again, oftentimes, informed choice is made with incomplete information. The evidence that we may use to guide informed decision-making include training. And of course, there's a broad spectrum of providers that care for patients with spinal disorders, including non-operative specialists like physiatrists and anesthesiologists, and operative specialists, including orthopedic surgeons and neurosurgeons. And training certainly may impact the approach that a provider may take to a common disorder. The literature and clinical trials, as well as systematic reviews, may provide the highest level of care for a broad population, but oftentimes that may not apply to the individual who we're discussing care with. Peer review and auditing our own practice is certainly important. And societies have provided information, including clinical practice guidelines and appropriate use of care guidelines that may be useful for evidence. But again, broadly, this evidence would be applying to a general population rather than to the individual with whom we're discussing care. I'll just indicate here a resource that I think is really quite useful. These are the NASS clinical practice guidelines, and our guideline committee in North American Spine Society has really used an evidence-based analysis to develop these guidelines and to give discrete information on the management disorders, including cervical radiculopathy, lumbar spinal stenosis, lumbar degenerative spondylolisthesis, and other disorders of the spine. What's important to recognize is that the transition from recommendations for the population to personal choice oftentimes is a difficult transition or translation, and that the health outcomes and recommendation for a large group of individuals or for a population looks at the distribution of outcomes and averages. And the aim here is to really improve the health of an entire population and to give broad guidelines. And this has got an important role for health policy at the national level. The challenge is translating those group outcomes to individual choice, identify within the individual patient the predictors of outcome. And this is really where personalized medicine or precision care becomes such a powerful and important tool for empowering informed choice. The concept of precision medicine is to take evidence that may be based on a population and apply it to the individual. And what's important is the precision with which we can make informed choices is based on information that may include genomics of the individual, metabolomics, proteomics, epigenomics, microbiomics, radiomics. This level of discrete and granular data is really critical to try and specify a recommendation that's appropriate for a population and apply it to an individual. The applications of precision medicine, I think, have been most broad in oncology, where again, as in spine surgery, we see terrific variation in approaches to common problems. Other applications include AI and diagnostics, and some of the work we've done in spine with predictive models on natural history, expected risks of care, expected outcomes, and expected complications. At UCSF, we have a Center for Computational Health, and work with our Center for Computational Health has led to some significant integration of clinical data to create models for the diagnosis, as well as predictive models regarding alternative pathways. The input data that we use in these models include information about patient demographics, physical and psychological factors, the clinical presentation of the individual patient, imaging information or radiomics, detailed information about biomechanics, laboratory values, immunology, and in some cases, genetic information or genomics. Using advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence and neural networks, we're really able to integrate clinical data and integrate the omics data to create complex models. Historically, we would use a finite number of variables and create a linear regression model in which we would have an odds ratio or a weighing of each of the identified risk factors. And in general, that type of an approach was really based upon a limited number of predictor variables, as well as limited information on the outcome variables. Now, in contrast, what we're doing with artificial intelligence and machine learning is we're actually creating neural networks that are much more complex and integrating much larger data sets to try and create relationships between the predictor variables and the outcomes of consideration that might not be linear and might not be otherwise apparent. This is a plot that really exemplifies this concept of clustering. And specifically, this is a model of clustering for low back pain. And the model is based upon predictor variables that include social and cultural considerations, epigenomics and genomics, biobehavioral considerations, information that may be derived from the electronic medical record, including laboratory values, comorbidities, imaging information, and discrete information about biomechanics. With this granular data, what we expect is that we may be able to cluster patients into different groups. And the model would suggest that by clustering patients into different groups, there may be a different intervention that may be appropriate for each cluster. So for example, in patients in group 1 who have a specific set of omics, that subset of patients might be most appropriate for non-operative care. Group 2 may be most appropriate or respond best to an interventional type procedure, and group 3 may require a reconstructive procedure. So again, what we're creating here, rather than a multivariate linear model, is a model that's much more complex and that tries to cluster patients with similar phenotypes to recommend a discrete care pathway for those patients. This is right now a theoretical model, but I think this is a area of precision medicine and a utilization for artificial intelligence that we expect will be really quite a bit more effective in creating predictive models in the future. And we've demonstrated the efficacy of this in some other areas where we've applied artificial intelligence to predict length of stay, as well as discharge disposition. We've done this with far more accuracy than we have with linear regression models. Work's also been done in this area by the Spinal Deformity Study Group here in the US, looking at adult spinal deformity. And the notion here is to cluster patients based upon safety, complications, and outcomes, patients with adult spinal deformity. And again, to recognize that there may be a clustering of patients which may be suggestive of a different rate of complications or different expected outcomes. And again, informed decision-making is based upon that ratio of expected benefit as well as expected risk. And knowing that benefit with more discretion, with more granularity, with more accuracy, certainly is valuable for the individual patient. So why is this so important in spine surgery? Well, the notion of being of predictive analytics and of informed choice is important. Number one, for quality metrics. So to really have an accurate estimation of what the expected rate of complications are, for example, and then to look at the ratio of observed complications to expected complications so that we really have a good understanding of whether or not our quality is appropriate. Certainly in the US, alternative payment models are driving a lot of the need to be more accurate in predictions. So if we're working under a bundled payment model where there's a certain payment that's going to be received for a 90-day period, or in an accountable care system where a certain budget is applied to a population, then knowing the risk of outliers, knowing the risk of cost drivers is important to do accurate budgeting. Resource allocation. So when to say no to spine surgery, when to say the risk is too great, when to say not yet, when to say, hey, there are modifiable things that we need to do before pursuing a surgical intervention. This can be really quite useful in directing appropriate care. And finally, and most importantly, looking at informed consent and shared decision-making. And the notion here that our conversation with patients will be much more effective and will be much more actionable and appropriate if we're sharing data that's appropriate to the individual rather than data that's appropriate to a population or average data. Some of the tools that we actually use actively in clinical practice now include the interdisciplinary conferences. So at UCSF, we have twice weekly conferences in which we confer on cases with other surgeons, and in some cases with other specialists, including neurologists and neuroradiologists. And in this instance, we're really able to get input from a broad spectrum of informed providers, and that can really help to guide informed choice and to add to perspective that may guide for an evidence-based approach for the individual patient. There are some predictive models that are available. There are some web-based calculators for complication rates. The SPORT calculator is a useful one for patients with degenerative pathology, including spinal stenosis and disc herniations. And with this calculator, we can input patient-specific variables and get observations of predicted outcomes based upon the Spine Outcomes Research Trial that was published now over 18 years ago. The National Surgical Quality Improvement Project, the NSQIP project, has a calculator that in which we can input information, again, that's patient-specific, and that is predictive of outcomes, and get estimates of the likelihood of prolonged length of stay, readmission, reoperation, and complications. And then there's a spine-specific calculator called the Spine Sage. So all of these are calculators or models based on limited data that are available to us now, and that may help empower informed choice rather than choices made for a population. So informed choice for the individual. There's also some personalized tools with regard to implants and patient-specific implants that may be quite useful. Pre-bent rods, interbody devices that may be useful in reliably gaining the outcome of surgery that is planned. I'll start with that briefly. Is the notion of patient-specific drill guides is one that may be useful. So we can optimize screw trajectories as well as screw sizes in patients with variable morphology of the spine. And with patient-specific drill guides, be quite precise with our implant placement. Another area is patient-specific surgical planning, and there are many tools available now to try and predict an appropriate alignment of the spine that will minimize postoperative mechanical complications. And to that end, knowing what a plan is or a goal for the alignment of the fused segments for the specific patient. And certainly recognizing the relationship of postoperative malalignment with mechanical problems like adjacent segment complications and mechanical failures, we can minimize those risks with optimal alignment that's made for the specific patient based upon considerations of age, of pelvic incidence, as well as of their specific spine shape or Rousselet type. The notion here is that we can actually look at our expected outcomes or expected alignment and look at our observed alignment and see how well our surgery matches a planned surgery. What we know is right now, using conventional deformity correction, in many instances, our surgical goals really are not met reliably. In fact, in spinal deformity, sagittal vertical axis, the lumbar pelvic mismatch, and total kyphosis, our postoperative observed outcomes only match our expected outcomes within 10 degrees about 37% of the time. So most of the time, we're not getting the observed outcomes that we expect or plan. And therefore, again, being more precise may be valuable. The value proposition is perhaps improved reliability of surgical correction, lower rates of mechanical complications, including adjacent segment pathology. Patient-specific antibody devices may also offer this with regard to a lower rate of subsidence with patient-specific antibody devices, as well as better alignment. Finally, I think more sophisticated models that are still in development may include looking at finite element analysis to determine segmental forces along the spine, both preoperative forces as well as postoperative forces. And this may really even better and more optimally guide appropriate constructs and appropriate surgical planning. So with that, I'll conclude that we observe a lot of variation in our approaches to spinal disorders, including complex spinal pathologies. Now, optimal care may be variable and patient-specific and not monolithic and not care that's appropriate for the entire population. Specifically, patient preferences, patient values, patient goals, patient comorbidities are really quite individualistic. So the average of outcomes of a population really aren't appropriate to apply to the individual. Precision medicine really has the promise of directing the right patient to the most appropriate care and thereby optimizing outcomes. I think the use of precision medicine tools in spine surgery may reduce risk for patients, reduce risk for surgeons, as well as reduce financial risk for hospitals and payers. Precision implants have value in improving the ability of spine surgeons to achieve their preoperative goals. So overall, I think the application of precision medicine, both in decision-making as well as implants, has great promise to optimize outcomes in spine surgery. And that's the advance in spine surgery that I think is really most promising, that involves digital orthopedic applications, and that I think is going to really change how we practice spine surgery in the next 5 years. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute. I look forward to any questions or further discussion.
Hello, my name is Robert Cohen. I am president of a brand new division at Stryker called Digital Robotics and Enabling Technologies. And I'll be happy to share with you some of the background to what we're doing, but also tie in how digital healthcare data is very closely related to enabling technologies, especially equipment in the operating room, and how the benefit of data, software, artificial intelligence, combined with software on enabling technologies will be our future. If you're not familiar with it, this is an orthopedic hard tissue robot that you see, the white arm. It's called Mako. We have over 1,200 hospitals with Mako robots right now, but these robots are a fascinating tool. You can do a level of accuracy and precision with a bone cut that you couldn't normally do with conventional materials or instruments that we've used in the past. It really is a fascinating enabling technology by itself. So the enabling technology helps execute a plan, gets you closer to individualized medicine. Here in this example, this is a total knee prosthesis on the right. The total knee, hundreds of thousands of total knee procedures in the world are put in annually. The question now is not, is the knee design of the implants right? The next evolution to improve healthcare is that knee implant put in that individual person to where that person needs it. Is the joint line of their knee when they flex and they extend, is that in the correct place? Is that the correct knee implant for that patient? Do we ever take into account how the patient looks, how the patient feels, what the expectations on the patient are? Well, now with accurate precision, we can help define this a little bit better, and the robot helps us execute a plan because these complex geometries require very, very finite planning. And we'll talk more about that. But if you look at a robot in hard tissue robotics, orthopedic applications, shoulder, spine, hips, knee replacement, this was not even discussed 10 years ago to any great extent. Look how fast an enabling technology has actually captured the imagination of the surgeons. It addresses a clinical issue with accuracy and precision that we couldn't get before. In the case of a knee, does a knee flex better? Does a patient have less pain? Can a person walk up and down stairs differently? Those are the questions, and we want to get closer to that and evolve these technologies. So now, robots, soft tissue robots, Da Vinci robot you're familiar with, hard tissue robots, there's 3 or 4 major manufacturers, orthopedic companies that sell. But I can tell you now, we're at a point, because of enabling tech, look how fast we've evolved. Now, robotics are here to stay. There's never been a robot in an industry has left it, and there's never been a robot that an industry did not benefit. And orthopedics will be no different. And I just show you this, not to show you sales, but I show you adoption of a software-driven device, in this case called the Stryker robot. But look how fast that curve is. Look how fast the adoption. And this isn't a company that's just creative and selling. This is a response of surgeons who actually realize the full potential of the robot, like what they see, like how their patients feel, and increase the utilization rate. So in enabling technology, even when you may think in hips and knees, we've evolved far enough, we haven't. There are still clinical issues that have to be solved. And this isn't as much about a new design of an implant. It's about a digital software-driven machine that is now capable of making that implant go in the right place in a patient and do amazing things. So when we look at a robot, just to give you an idea, a robot is not necessarily just that physical embodiment. You notice there's different cutting tools on it. There's different platforms that control the software and feed. I just want to be clear as we go forward. Still, the purpose is the implant on the right. That's the implant that remains in a person. That's the implant that helps that person have mobility perfectly for their whole lifetime. So this is still an objective with this vehicle to get us there. But when you look at these pictures, think also that it's software driven. Think of all the clinical insights that can be derived through electronic health records, through specific patient data entered possibly from imaging. Think about in a pre-op condition now, preoperatively, virtually, digitally, what we're able to do now by taking in a segment CT scans into solid models, superimposing the implant. Now, this by itself is great if we did this at home before surgery. But the reality of it is we still needed a tool to execute this great plan. That's the idea of the robot. So what keeps the robot alive and what keeps the robot being a effective initiator, if you will, of all these clinical insights preoperatively, virtually, digitally? It's the robot is the output. But just like if you bought a laptop 2 years ago, your laptop is still good. It's the software that keeps it going. It's what you do digitally that keeps that alive. So just to give you an example, we just evolved on Mako software on the total knee on the robot, and this is the total knee. So now we allow different positioning and leg alignment which we couldn't do before with manual instruments. It's actually fascinating what we're able to do with software and what we're able to show digitally representation of solid model configurations, computer generated, of a CT scan, of an image, and replicating the type of motion that person would have based on where the implants, all computer simulation, all with digital insights, all with digital data that's very specific to that patient. This is a true representation of the patient. And on top of all that, we could do things now with artificial intelligence, see the arrows, that can actually help say, wait a second, just based on our algorithms in the background, this patient may not be perfectly aligned, possibly 1 millimeter more distal to a knee femoral component like you see in the picture. That may benefit to get you closer to that approximation of joint line. So now it's not just a robot, and it's not just an impression of a patient. There's actually now instruction, surgeon instruction, that is helping facilitate this case in amazing ways. And also you can see sizing prediction on the right is an implant overhanging the bone, avoid soft tissue impingement, software giving that feedback back digitally. And then all the way on the left, this is the first software we wrote to actually stratify during the knee case exactly the data on implant positioning relative to bone, and we could port it out in the future directly into patients' digital records. So now we have digital archiving of the exact three-dimensional placement of that implant, specifically to this person. And then we'll just keep going with new applications. We're going to work on now with hips and knees. We're now going to work on shoulders. We're going to work on spine. Very difficult, minimal access, not a good field of view. Can software help us with the digital inputs understand spatial relationship of where bones are? So in this case, here's a glenoid preparation. Glenoids in your shoulder, if you look, you're looking through a small tunnel. You don't have always full visualization, and it's really hard to understand the plane of the resection. Now, with a three-dimensional model of a person's scapula and humerus, and now with the pre-plan looking at bone density mapping digitally, we'll be able to tell the robot where to go, where that implant is best specifically for that patient to restore the center of rotation of their shoulder and not overload superior bone. So again, it's the same robot, just different software and now different digital patient inputs. Likewise, let me show you then another visualization of digital inputs to help is now using augmented reality or glasses, mixed reality. This is an image of a surgeon actually looking through the glasses of now, instead of showing the digital data on a screen above the robot, we can actually show the digital data superimposed holograms through glasses that in mixed reality hover over the patient, reduces the time you need to take eyes off the wound, reduces the complexity of the surgery, delivers clinical insights, in this case, bone registration, specifically to that patient to make ease of use. Maybe that increases accuracy, but more information delivered during the procedure to the surgeon digitally and enabled through these types of glasses. So this is just beginning, but this is a fascinating way to display more information for decision capabilities. And then as we evolve, it's clear. This technology is moving, this technology is not stopping. Whether we look at digital therapeutics, digital at-home care, in the middle, we have a knee brace that has sensors in it that can record the flexion of a person's knee while they're walking, while they're sitting in physical therapy. And the sensors send the data to your smartphone, and your smartphone is connected to the internet, which goes to a dashboard that actually can be pulled up. So now real-time information, full compliance of motion and mobility, which is one of the indicators of success, again, in a total knee procedure. And now combine that with everything going on virtual reality, all these things provide more information digitally. And now the vehicle on how to give more information, whether mixed reality or software, back to the surgeon for clinical insight. So we're in this world, but all these things by themselves are nothing. They're nothing without humans who want to innovate. And it's the creative tying all these things together into the continuum of care that make a difference. So now we ask ourselves, With all this data and all these new things and ways to get data, whether preoperative through imaging, intraoperatively through data off a robot, or postoperatively through home care, through imaging, through cameras, or through a knee brace, now we can think of procedures, surgical procedures in different ways and maybe come up with some digital intelligence and data intelligence to maybe give statistical significance over which way we should go. All these products that you see there on the screen, these are products that are already in the operating room that Stryker distributes. Some of these are endoscopy equipment. Some of these are general surgery equipment. Some of these are counting blood sponges in the OR. Some of these are representation of what we could do tracking our power instruments and the utility of our power instruments. There's femoral acetabular impingement software. There's navigation software relative to spine or cranial, ENT, lots of different areas to go. The funny thing about this, all this equipment are great equipment, and they go in millions of procedures a year, but they're all capable of capturing data. They're capable of capturing unique data sets that we typically have not captured before. Now, in partnership with surgeon and hospitals, we can now look at data and actually capture that data and maybe string it to what was unique about that patient and learn from it. So this is where we are at Stryker right now. We're trying to stitch the continuum of care all the way from an event on the side of the road, a car accident or whatnot, to a person gets in an ambulance. Stryker can outfit 70% of the back of an ambulance. Can we start to put 5G? Can we put some decision making? Can we provide more information on what is exactly going on with that patient prior to that patient getting into the hospital emergency room? Or if it's a total knee as an example, well, that's not an event on the right side of the road. That's more, ouch, my knee hurts. Okay, let's start tracking. Go to the orthopedic surgeon. Orthopedic surgeon gets an image. Get an image. Now we look at PROMs and mobility scores. We look at pain ratings. Then we look at other things like blood work, BMI, this person is diabetic. And then we slowly evolve through the operative procedures I described, post-operative, and we get all data. We now have a way to capture data across the continuum of care and use it in ways that are unbelievable. This was not the situation 5 years ago. Hospitals didn't necessarily want to partner with surgeons on data collection. Surgeons didn't necessarily want to partner with industry, and industry was selling equipment. Now, to evolve for the next level to improve outcomes or improve quality of care or improve safety or even hospital efficiency, now there's enough people that want to tie together and pull these things together to be able to talk about it. So now we're starting to look at that software and we're starting to look at the unique data and data sets. And now it's yielding unbelievable amount of information when we want to stitch across that continuum of care for an individual patient. Now, let me give you an idea. This is the type of data we can collect. Look at this type of data. Now, this is data that we have right now, but in many different places. There was not a lot of motivation to get all of this data and put it into one big bucket. Now we're motivated. You may say, okay, but this data is just data. Okay, let me show it to you this way. Now I take that exact data and now look. Now I can make it, oh, look, we can make an implant choice. Let's take a total knee patient. Should it be a partial knee, a cruciate retaining knee, a posterior stabilized knee? What's the right Stryker implant? Where's the best alignment in that patient for this? What should the hospital expect as far as length of time of the surgical procedure for efficiency? How can we take into account bone quality, see whether the person have a bone cemented implant or should be cemented? So I could go on, but these are insights that an orthopedic innovation company should be doing, because this all in turn contributes to that implant that's going in the patient and going in amazing ways. But then you can add to it. Look at the way you get off CT. This is artificial intelligence right in front of you. We now can take a CT scan, stitch it together and make it into a segmented virtual model of an actual patient. And now we can recognize with AI the osteophytes. And this will provide us, firstly, where is the real host bone and what the size of the implant should be if the osteophytes were removed. And this provides some surgeon guidance in the operating room through visualization of digital data of where the osteophytes should be removed in some areas, like a posterior lateral knee, where there's not a lot of access to. So it really is fascinating. And I could keep going. This is now where we have AI looking at bone model CT scans and looking at the thicknesses across all the different aspects of the joint, medial condyle, lateral condyle, patellofemoral, and looking at the cartilage degrading and the change in the cartilage areas. Again, more insights in a three-dimensional model where we can look at the cartilage loss, the extent of the arthritis, and then maybe recommend if this is a partial knee candidate patient or not, or is someone degrading with their arthritis condition at a faster rate, it should go right to a total knee. Fascinating data that we just never had before that's there on CT scans, and we're starting to pursue that. We're also looking at B scores where we can grade now the bone to the extent of arthritis. Through CTs and anatomic landmarks, we can digitally interpret how much flattening a condyle's had to say, okay, the cartilage is gone, but now let's look at the bone changes, which may be directly correlated to soft tissue laxity. So unbelievable insights again on scores. And I just show you, we've already had some publications on this AI, predicting the length of time, looking at readmission rate, looking at reoperation rate, looking at case procedure workflow, efficiency. There's so many different ways now to take this data that we've had before. Now, collecting this data is not so easy. Stitching it together is not so easy, but the value proposition of it, and this is just the beginning. We'll eventually get to where in the cloud, we'll be able to take a CT scan in the cloud. We'll have algorithms that'll automatically segment the bone. See the segmentation picture? That's a real patient. Look at the osteophyte. Look at this arthritic condition. That's an actual rendering that we could show visually of a real patient on someone's smartphone. And a surgeon could look. And then the surgeon could say with a click, let me superimpose Stryker implants. And that's a superimposing virtual model of implant fitting to see how it looked, and then virtually put the knee in flexion to see how it looks with all the data derived specific to that patient. And that is the patient then that gets channeled to the robot, where the robot then becomes the execution. And once we tie all these robots together with Wi-Fi, we'll be able to get more data and do amazing things. And once we get to statistical significance, we'll be able to separate patients and talk about patients. They'll no longer be the average 64-year-old. There no longer will be the average 64-year-old female. We will actually take severity of disease and unique parameters of that patient into account because of digital healthcare records. Think where we evolved. I sort of use this total knee as an example. We made a remarkable innovation achievement in 2016. This was the first Mako use of a total knee of a robot. This was 2016. We are only talking 6-7 years ago. Look how the world has changed in 6-7 years ago. But now we have a machine in the operating room that is a data collector and a data enabler. And the future now is connect that with augmented reality, computer vision on imaging, put cameras in the operating room and look at efficiency and where people should stand. Maybe we could reduce the burden of nurse workload. Let's look at holograms. Let's deliver more information for more clinical insights. Let's start to use data intelligence in ways we've never had before, all to benefit the patient and to provide a surgeon with more digital information for decision-making capabilities. We should be talking about breaking up patients into not big groups, but small groups and small groups. And the 64-year-old female who's a diabetic, a BMI 39, a flexion contracture, 2 millimeters of bone wear, that's a class of a phenotype on the bottom. And we should specifically say what's best now for that finite patient, not a big grouping of patients that's too broad. That will be the next evolution of healthcare in amazing ways. And then where you see this is going, this is advanced digital healthcare, fully connected operating rooms, all equipment talking to one another, all equipment real time, being able to pull data off a cloud, all for decision making. We are in such a good place right now. This vision will have an improvement in healthcare outcomes. We're in a really good place right now as an industry and as a segment, medical segment. But I'll tell you, this journey is going to be a good one. It's going to be great times ahead. Thanks for listening.
Life is
Life is
Life is
For some, life takes a difficult turn. At this moment, patients around the world are fighting to survive. Doctors and nurses are fighting to help keep them alive, supported by many others who are responsible for the delivery of medical care. We stand together with them all. We are acutely focused on their missions. We watch and learn, gaining insights into their needs. We listen to the voices of those on the front lines of medical care. They inspire us and drive our innovation. NIPRO strongly believes in this hands-on approach. It guides everything we do. It's what led us to diversify into medical equipment and pharmaceuticals after starting out as a maker of medical and pharmaceutical glass products. Today, our expertise extends to products for regenerative medicine and beyond. We will continue to develop expertise and novel technologies that promise to have a positive impact on patient outcomes, staying true to our belief that hands-on knowledge leads to the best products. NIPRO is dedicated to making a difference in the lives of patients and families, irrespective of their country, culture, age, or gender. Inspired by our employees and an inclusive culture that embraces diversity, we strive to create innovative medical devices and medicines that help people everywhere lead longer, better lives. Live longer. Live better. NIPRO.
例えば輸液の管理や体温、呼吸数などのバイタルデータも自動で送受信。病院内でも病院外でも正確な情報を共有。医療現場の働き方改革をデジタルトランスフォーメーションで支えるニプロ総合医療ネットワーク。すべての命に喜びを。医療機器、医薬品のニプロです。
We are all incredibly excited about the future at Next Orthosurgical. The company is poised for explosive growth in spinal implants with the introduction of new technologies which will be organically developed here in Vista, California. That, combined with a sound acquisition and licensing strategy, our goal is to become a full-line spinal implant and biologics company servicing the needs of our surgeon customers worldwide. Our acquisition of VTI Interfuse in 2020 shows our commitment to adding innovative technologies, and we are actively looking at expanding the Interfuse offering by exploring an FDA approval for 3D printed or surface-coated version of the Interfuse implant. Our executive team has a wealth of industry knowledge and experience and knows that the pathway to success involves collaboration with thought-leading orthopedic spine and neurosurgeons. Our CEO, Roy Yoshimi, was the original founder and CEO of Alphatech Spine. Other management team members have worked in leadership roles at several of the leading spine companies in the United States. We feel that there is plenty of room for innovation in restorative spinal procedures. The introduction of new disruptive technologies will ultimately benefit patients with options for less invasive surgical interventions. We hope to be on the forefront of these innovations for the future to include MIS and endoscopic procedures performed at both hospitals and in the ever-growing ambulatory surgery center sector. On the other side of the spectrum, Next Orthosurgical also has plans to develop a world-class deformity and complex spine system. We recognize that none of the industry leaders in spine have made the leap to market leader without being able to tackle the most challenging adult and pediatric spinal cases. We also know that success for our company will depend on solid relationships with our distributor network. We are focused on establishing long-term alliances with our business partners and will reward those who help us achieve our aggressive revenue goals for the future. We offer a fair and competitive incentive plan for our distributor partners. None of our ambitious plans would be possible without the support of our multi-billion-dollar parent company. They will be helping fuel our growth and expansion. The 7,500 square foot addition of our manufacturing facility and recently ordered machinery is a clear sign that we are getting ready to meet our increasing demand for products both domestically and internationally. We are proud of our manufacturing capacity, which gives us a competitive advantage for our company as we can provide high-quality implants faster, better, and less expensively than our competitors. Also included in the recently acquired building in Vista will be the home of our new multi-station, state-of-the-art BioSkills Training Center. Next Ortho Surgical is also a great place to work with a dynamic company culture and talented employees. Our Southern California location is in the heart of medical device innovation and an ideal area to recruit talented industry professionals. If you are interested in joining our team as either a direct employee or distributor partner, please go to our career section on the website. If you are a surgeon with an innovative product concept, we'd love to listen to your idea. A meeting request can be made on the surgeon portal of our website. Thank you for your interest in Next Ortho Surgical.
はい、次はジェフリー・ロッツ先生です。ロッツ先生は椎間板研究と脊椎のバイオメカニクス研究者の、第一人者でして、数々の賞を受賞され、スパイン誌などですね、副編集長を務めるなど、もう世界を代表する整形外科、そして運動器の研究者です。UCSF 整形外科では、NIH から支援を受けている、運動器のコンソーシアム、CCMBM、そして、C ドクター、こういった、新しいアプローチを、創設され、さらに、NSF からですね、支援されています、新しい産学連携、CDMI を創設されまして、ディレクターとしてですね、整形外科運動器研究の発展に非常に大きく貢献され、従事されております。僕も個人的にも、NASA の、共同研究で無重力マウス、あとは腰痛研究などで大変お世話になっております。本日はロッツ先生は基礎研究からいかにその臨床応用へ持っていくか、改革を起こすためにはやはり科学的なエビデンスが欠かせませんので、そういったアプローチについてもう最新の情報をですね、お伝えいただけるということです。では、ロッツ先生、よろしくお願いいたします。
So thanks for including me today. I'm going to give an overview of some new developments regarding the use of sensors and data integration for musculoskeletal research and clinical applications. So there's been an increasing use of sensors and digital information for musculoskeletal applications. This is an example of a study that was conducted. It's an umbrella review showing increasing publications over time of data on musculoskeletal injury research that includes wearable sensors, and this shows the location of where those sensors are applied, which indicates that most people are interested in the lower extremity and that the interest in this technology is increasing. But in addition to wearable sensors, there's also a growing availability of data coming from implants. So this is a recent study that looked at implantable devices within orthopedic implants. This is a part of a knee reconstruction that shows a sensor that can measure pressure in the joint, proximal femur and hip replacement showing implanted sensors, so data can be collected during patient movement and used for either refining the design of these implants or tracking patients' recovery over time. In addition to sensors, there's also digital information that's being extracted from medical imaging. This shows how people are trying to systematize how quantitative information can be collected from routine or advanced medical imaging, and then that information integrated into the clinical workflow. Beyond imaging, there's a growing interest in genetic information or omics, where blood samples can be used to measure features of patients that may have clinical value. This is a recent study from UCSF that was integrating genetic information from human data and animal data to better understand mechanisms of disease and also establish animal models that would be the basis for clinical therapy development. So with all of this, there's a need for integration, and the patients with the musculoskeletal disorders, particularly musculoskeletal pain, come with a complex set of features that span their beliefs and attitudes, their perception of pain or disability, and then associated behavior. And so there's measurements that are becoming available, which factors all of these aspects of the patient as a whole. And so in addition to collecting the data, there's also the need to interpret the data collectively to come to provide extracted information that's useful for clinical decision making. And one particularly interesting model that people are starting to pay more attention to, I think, in terms of operationalization, is the biopsychosocial model, which looks at the patient through the lens of a number of factors, not only just physical, but genetic, psychological, social. And when we begin to do this, the challenge that arises is there's different clinical and research arenas that represent aspects of this that communicate differently. They think differently about data. They have different literature that they rely on that may be siloed. So it's how do we integrate these different perspectives as we're trying to integrate data to look at the patient in a more holistic fashion. And so the goal here, though, ultimately is to take these data from patients and then to allow us to identify subset of patients that may respond better to certain treatments. So the goal of clustering or defining subgroups is ultimately where these data may be valuable. So we'd like to identify data sets or biomarkers that identify subgroups of patients that may be distinct in some characteristics that those biomarkers suggest. And if we can identify those patients and their subgroups, we hope to establish a better path to treatment. And what's an intermediate step in order to achieve that is understanding what those biomarkers mean in terms of mechanisms of either disease or dysfunction, those mechanisms which then provide a link to a treatment with a mechanism of action that may be assigned to that subgroup of patients that have those biomarkers. And the linkages between the biomarkers, mechanisms, and treatment mechanism of action is obviously there's a lot of preclinical data there that can help us interpret clinical information in order to connect those dots. And then ultimately, the linkage between the treatments and the biomarkers become the basis for either clinical trials or treatment allocation in a clinical setting. So an example I wanted to share where this is actively happening is in part of the Backpack Research Consortium that's part of the HEAL initiative. And the goal of this initiative is to target the opioid epidemic by developing better ways to identify subgroups of patients that can be managed with optimal alignment of treatment. And so this theme of digital data, integrating data to cluster and identify patients that may be optimally assigned to a certain treatment group is something that's kind of mission critical here. And as part of this, there's a number of clinical studies where data is being generated, and those data are being harmonized and aggregated so that the measurements are collected in the same manner across multiple sites in the US. And those measurements involve a lot of the things we just been talking about in terms of quantitative medical imaging, movement biomechanics, and I'll kind of show you some of those and the challenges that arise when you try to integrate information from these multiple areas. We have clinicians and scientists who are thinking about these data, and they can be in their own particular silo in terms of, if there may be orthopedics thinking about the importance of certain data relative to what may be viewed as mechanisms of injury. And then similarly, a psychologist or a sociologist also have perspectives that they bring to helping identify ways to interpret it. But a challenge that's kind of one step removed is the data scientists. And the data scientists may not be familiar with the disease at all. So they're coming in kind of an agnostic approach, looking for patterns of data that may be interesting to use for segmenting patients, but that's they're not really tethered to mechanisms. And so our the goal here ideally would be to combine the benefits of both approaches, where we have experts who are knowledgeable about mechanisms, have a gateway into the broader literature, and the data scientists are looking for patterns. And as we can inject this mechanistic framework, we can hopefully distinguish patterns that are spurious from patterns that are potentially useful. And one strategy that we're using for this purpose is to have a theoretical schema that sits behind the data analyses to help us kind of ground us in mechanistic perspectives. And this is an example of one depiction of this, where the patient is in the middle here, where there's anatomy, nociception, pain experience, and functional consequence. And then there's aspects that influence that. There's biomechanical neuromotor control, there's psychological factors, societal, systemic, familial factors, and these have all been investigated in one way or another through the biopsychosocial model, but have different specialties and techniques and tools within each that have been developed over time. And so we're in the process of trying to think about all of the measurements that are being collected, and how do those measurements affiliate to these different domains within the theoretical framework, so we can then determine, are these measurements redundant? Do they contribute to the overall model in a unique fashion or a complementary fashion? And are there areas that are missed that we may need a measurement that we don't currently have? So this theoretical framework is valuable to think about how we organize measurements, and also communicate between this clinician, scientists, and data scientists. It's also provided a framework for developing new measurements and thinking about how do we digitize data in a way that can be aggregated together in a holistic model. This is an example of some work that's being done to look at imaging, taking quantitative measurements, for example, of fat in vertebra, fat in muscle, measuring cartilage properties, spectroscopic properties of the intervertebral disc. And all of these measurements require us to think about what's the valuable information that needs to be extracted, which requires segmentation and some automated approaches. Similarly, in this area of motor control, active tissues like the paraspinal muscles are potentially important to study, and but in order to do that, you need to somehow segment out where the muscles are. And one of the techniques that we're using to characterize muscle quality is fat fraction imaging, to look at how much of the paraspinal muscles are actually functioning as muscle versus non-contractile tissue. There's motor control also that can be captured using sensors of various types. We have wearable sensors that patients take home with them. So this tells us essentially how much they move. During a 7-day period, we're using depth cameras for in-clinic measurements that tell us not how much they move, but how they move and the quality of motion. And for both of these approaches, this issue of extracting numbers that can allow us to distinguish groups or define what may be important is a challenge that I'll talk about in a minute. In terms of systemic input, blood biomarkers are of interest, and particularly how those may relate to inflammation in joints. And so, are there measurements in blood that might be complementary or can be combined with measurements from imaging, which might identify a region of the spine that's a particular target for intervention, for example. Psychological factors can be quantified using things like fMRI. Quantitative sensory testing is another parameter that's being used that could be combined with routine questionnaires, things that are already being utilized in the clinical setting. One other example is societal input. Things like social risk factors can be extracted from the electronic health record using natural language processing techniques. So, quantifying and digitizing things like social isolation, accessibility to transportation, et cetera. These may be factors which influence, the patient's ability to participate in, clinical investigation or study. Patient preferences in terms of their treatment and outcome is also important to quantify. And so we've developed some tools that allow us to assess that for the individual as well. And so for all of these, the practical challenge is how do we extract information from these measurements? And one of the key terms is dimension reduction. If you've got thousands or millions of data points, how do you distill it down to those few that can be combined? And so transforming raw data into features that can be used in supervised learning and aggregated across all these domains is really critical. And in order to do that, it's really important to combine the complementary strengths of humans and computers. So the humans who might have some prior knowledge of what might be important mechanistically, and then the computers obviously can do this in a more automated fashion. And so this becomes, I think, a real bottleneck in terms of interpretability. Some of the data, once we have these extracted features, the techniques that we're using are kind of shown here. This is one example of a clustering approach to look at combinations of measurements for a patient, see if we can determine subgroups. And as we're in the process of doing that, we're looking at the measurements and how do we determine which ones are more important than others, so we can kind of stratify of all the measurements. There may be a subset here at the top that are really the more value added in terms of defining these clusters. And one a challenge that's behind all of this is the fact that we have multiple joints in the spine, multiple tissues within joints. And so there's this hierarchical approach that needs to happen to determine how do those all add up to some patient level variable that tells us something about the anatomic disorder or anatomic anomalies that are in the spine that might be contributing to a patient level pain experience. And so the hierarchical multi-factor analysis is something that we've been exploring that's been led by Abel Torres. One other valuable perspective is to, in addition to looking at the clinical data in isolation, is to really link those to preclinical data that might help us understand mechanisms. So this, I think, helps to interpret patterns and what those patterns might mean in terms of disease mechanism and then also treatment allocation. And so the question is how do we do that in a systematic way? And thinking back to this perspective of domains that relate to the functional consequence of the patient, each of these domains has a literature behind it, and investigators that study and have been trained to investigate that literature. And with that, there's a language that they use and maybe bias in terms of how those literature are looked at and interpreted. And so that becomes important in terms of reading or evaluating literature when we're trying to get the mechanistic information there. And that applies in these different areas that are represented here that may have different training, different language, et cetera. And so one of the tools that we're using to try to organize language in a systematic way to get at mechanisms that could be brought into these clinical research as knowledge graphs allows us to look at connections between studies, identify mechanisms that may be studied that are part of those associations, and allow us to then connect that information to the clinical patterns that will be seen in these clinical studies. Another approach is large language models, where we can interpret the terms that are used in the context of literature that has some mechanistic information to extract. And so that project is one that we're collaborating with a group from Cornell, Jin Yang and Michael Hederich. So the vision ultimately is to use digital information that represents various aspects of the patient with some theoretical background that hopefully identifies subgroups of patients that are more responsive to certain treatments, or can be viewed as in a group that matches population level data to patient level information. And this requires both a combination of interpreting digital information, but then combining digital information from various areas represented by a psychosocial model. So in summary, simultaneous integration of data is important to generate a holistic view of the patient. Goal is to optimize measurements that can identify subgroups and identify those that have the most discriminating power. And having this mechanistic perspective helps keep us away from a black box interpretation, and hopefully have more adaptability, because the patterns can be linked to mechanistic findings, which help clinicians and patients identify where these might fit with existing data or existing approaches that are already in clinical use. So thank you for your attention, and I'd like to acknowledge all of the collaborators that work with me at UCSF and as part of the NIH Backpack Consortium. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about design thinking and innovation in healthcare. YC and I are from IDEO, and we're really excited to spend some time with you today and dive right into our topic. So hello, nice to meet you. We're going to start with some quick intros so that you have a sense for who we are. And I'll go first. My name is Brittany. I am a senior design lead and design researcher at IDEO. So my job is really focused on understanding the user that we're designing for and making sure that their real, genuine, unmet needs are represented in any kind of product or service that we may design. So that's a bit about me, and I'll pass it to my colleague, YC.
Hi, everyone. My name is YC. I am a director within our health domain. I help lead our portfolio of practice within digital health. So think of things like digital therapeutics, telemedicine, apps and websites, and digital platforms for all types of healthcare services. And I serve on teams to help bring things from ideas to tangibility and really creating things, making things real.
All right, thanks, YC. So let's get started. As I mentioned, we are designers from IDEO. And if you're not familiar with IDEO, we're going to give you a really brief history. So when we say designers, we actually mean a lot of different things. In fact, we have about 35 craft cohorts at IDEO, and we have people representing all kinds of craft backgrounds. So not a standard designer, as you might think. We also have mechanical engineers and data scientists and anthropologists and journalists. So a really, really big variety here. To zone in on where we are in the world, we have 8 design studios, and YC and I are stationed out of our San Francisco studio currently. Hello, San Francisco. But we also have studios around the world in London, Munich, Shanghai, and Tokyo. When we're thinking about how IDEO approaches design thinking, it's important for us to recognize that design does not happen in a vacuum. Rather, it happens in these systems that we all help to co-create. And I think as designers, we take it as our responsibility to acknowledge and take responsibility for the systems that we're designing in, whether that's education or healthcare or climate change and sustainability. We believe that we can create positive impact through design. I think this is really what drives IDEO as a company. And I think it shows up in a lot of different ways, especially in our really rich history. So some of the ways that you might know IDEO are through some of our original products, including the Apple mouse. We've also done work in Peru designing education systems. We designed a voting booth in LA County. And another example is designing a portable breast pump for working moms. So as you can see, we really span many industries and types of products and services. So what is design thinking? Let's do a refresher in case there are folks who aren't super familiar with it. So this is the standard approach that you might have seen when it comes to design thinking. The most important thing for you to know is that we always start with people. We believe that in order to really understand the lay of the land and what people are dealing with, you have to get close to the problem. And that means getting close to people. And from there, you can expand outwards to understand the business viability and the technological feasibility. So innovation really happens at the center of all these things, where they all come together. When we're talking about designing for people, we have to realize that people are complex, right? And the things that they might tell you or the things that they do might not necessarily match up with the things that they think and feel. And for that reason, it's really important for us to study humans in the context of the things that they're doing. And also, we want to try to get to the root of their core motivations and their values, which can help explain their behavior, especially when there's contradictions. This is our process when we're thinking about design thinking. There is a staged approach, which usually begins by going broad and diverging and getting inspired by what's out there. And then really trying to synthesize what we learned and converge on some core learnings or key takeaways. From there, we diverge again and we ideate, which means we come up with lots and lots of solutions that might help to address the problems that we learned about. And once we come upon some solutions that have some heat or have some synchronicity, we go into execution mode. But most importantly, we do not start at execution. We start with inspiration. So when we're going through this process, admittedly, there are moments that feel quite concrete and easy to grasp, but also there's some moments that feel pretty abstract. And I think this is what really gives design its edge, is being able to navigate between these two worlds, between what is observable and what lies beneath the surface. Design thinking happens not just once, I would say. It's really an iterative process, and it follows this learning loop. So you might begin by exploring and trying to understand where the opportunity is, then doing some synthesis to distill down those learnings, creating some designs, going back out there in the world to prototype them, test them, and then ultimately reevaluate those hypotheses, and this loop goes over again and again in typically iterative design loops. So design thinking, complex, but also totally doable. Okay, so our next question here is, what can design do for health? So we'd like to introduce you to our health team. These lovely people here represent some of the faces at IDEO who focus strictly on health challenges. So folks in our health domain, as we're called, we have a mission statement. And that is that we use design to solve some of the most complex challenges in health and well-being and bring equity, dignity, and joy to all. We believe this is a pretty tall order, but it's important, especially when we think about the responsibility that we feel when we are trying to tackle a very sensitive topic in people's lives. And not just in America, right? We're talking about globally. So trying to understand the context in which people live, work, play, and take care of their health. So at IDEO, our health work is pretty expansive and always evolving. And we started to create impact in healthcare by 4 core ways. So the way that we do that are, 1, by designing revolutionary health products. You might know that IDEO created one of the first EpiPens for self-injection. So from that history, we've really gone through many, many phases of work, and we still do lots of work with medical device companies. Number 2 is by creating digitally enabled health platforms beyond pills and procedures. So this is like what YC is talking about when we're doing design for digital therapeutics. Number 3 is humanizing the organizations that enable healthcare. So this includes people who are physically doing the work. And so helping them to do their best work means that we are taking an upstream approach to impact health outcomes downstream. And last is driving positive health outcomes through systemic change. So this is really looking even further upstream to address some of the policies and structures that are enabling healthcare, or in some ways disabling healthcare. So that is a snapshot of how IDEO approaches health and healthcare. And now I'm going to let YC talk to you a bit more about some of the work and case studies that we've done over the years.
Thanks, Brittany. At IDEO, we've been designing healthcare health products for the past couple of decades. And if you were to scroll through into any hospital within the US, you'll probably be able to find one of IDEO's designed medical products. I'm not sure how it is in Japan, but we may have found some stuff over there into those hospitals. And while we started off designing a lot of industrial design, now our project sort of extend to the scope of the healthcare ecosystem, like Brittany has mentioned. Anywhere within orthopedics, for example, anywhere from creating tools for improving spinal surgery to creating digitally enabled platforms to allow nurses, surgeons, technicians to be able to do their jobs better. And I'll walk you through some of these case studies. So the one that you saw on the prior slide was with a device manufacturer named Medtronic, and this was to build next generation surgical instrument that will allow surgeons to be able to perform spinal surgeries more easily. And this is something that's on the market and was a dramatically changed how much time surgeons were able to do in terms of 55% less time placing screws, 38% less wobble during spinal injuries. It's something that was very powerful and effective for their workflow. And this was done through prototyping. One of the stories from this project was one of the surgeons was demonstrating something that their ideal tool might be like. And one of our designers was, wait, give me a moment. Let me grab some stuff from around my table. They taped some pieces together to create the prototype on the left and asked, was this something that you would like? And the surgeon was like, yes, this is a much better form factor. The prototype on the left evolved to become the system on the right, something evoking the simple power tools that we can find in our own personal garages, but now optimized for spinal surgery. The next project I want to share was around a digital support tool for operations. As you can see on the right, the operating room tends to have dozens of different staff with a variety of different roles to coordinate in the operating room. And what this product helped do was be able to better coordinate each of the roles of the staff within the operating room and be able to personalize due to the workflow of the different attending and to the surgeons that was operating. So almost like a personalized dashboard and operating tool for that surgeon. Now, we also wanted to share some examples of projects in healthcare beyond just orthopedics, because we know that health is very linked, and there's a lot of talk these days about population health, about holistic health and integrated health. And so we want to share some stories from the field around that. This is a project that we did with Ford, one of the major car manufacturers in the US, around how do we use mobility to increase access to healthcare services, especially for populations that are more marginalized and underserved, places that are more like food deserts, mobility deserts, that have less access to care. And the team created this platform called Viva, which is a mobility service that brings care to you. And we partnered with the Martin Luther King Hospital in Los Angeles to be able to prototype and co-design this mobile clinic to the population. Another project we have is around digital health and how we can use digital tools to allow young schizophrenic patients to become more motivated in engaging in health behaviors. And so this was a collaboration with the University of California, San Francisco, to basically bring into market their approved regimen called Prime, which was a method to be able to allow patients to be able to pay attention to their care through peer coaching, through support, and through digital tools like you see on the bottom right. Prime was made into a product and an app that we then launched into a pilot with a variety of different patients, and actually led to significant changes in both their schizophrenia and depression. And it's something that the UCS team is now actively scaling to address other mental health issues. Now, for a slightly longer example of how design can bring innovation to the healthcare system, we have PillPack, which was a startup that was incubated out of our IDEO office back in 2014, when there were 3 people. And this startup has now since grown to hundreds of users, or hundreds of thousands of users, and has recently been bought by Amazon for about $782 million, so about $1 billion. So this is one of our success stories. And for here, we were tackling a challenge on how do we design an online first pharmacy, and what would be the digital tools that patients will need to be accessed to. And also, with now removing sort of that brick and mortar element, could we redesign how medication could be delivered to the patient? And sort of where PillPack's main signature interaction, the drug roll sort of was invented, where medication based off of that time and day were all packed into one little baggie, so that you could then just grab and go and be able to, not need to open multiple pill packs. This was award-winning design that the team spent months prototyping different amalgamations of, from the dispenser of the pill pack to the actual instructions and the handouts and carrying bags on how the patients would then use the pill pack throughout the day. And was also really demonstrated the power of user feedback and showing these prototypes at an early stage to users to get their thoughts on how to both improve the product and how to be able to address different needs. One of the areas that the team stumbled upon early on was, yes, this was helpful to a geriatric population that had a lot of medication to be able to figure out what to take every day, but it was also very helpful for those that were on the go, the jet setters that didn't want to carry multiple pill bottles and instead could take our little pill pouch with their medications for a week or so. All this sort of led to the success and adoption of PillPack and its digital ecosystem. Now, we kind of wanted to leave you with a couple thoughts of encouragement, as we know that you all will be building the future of health. And so a couple statements that we believe that anyone can be a designer, and that anyone could have embraced the mentality of a designer through the design thinking process. And we also believe anyone can shape the future of healthcare, one that is more holistic and will lead to better patient results. So why not you? One of our founders, Bill Mogridge, once said, the only way to experience an experience is to experience it. And so we want to encourage everyone listening today is go build a future and go experience it and bring it to the world. Thank you. This is IDEO, Brittany NYC. Feel free to contact us. We're always happy to chat about health and innovation.
Hello, I'm Thomas Vail, coming to you from the University of California in San Francisco. It's a real privilege and pleasure to be with you for DOCSF in Japan. It's an incredible opportunity to bring a community together, talking about technology and application of technology, particularly in the musculoskeletal space. So I really appreciate being included. And today I will address orthopedic moonshots, innovation, and collaboration. And I'll end with a couple of predictions for you about innovation in the musculoskeletal space. Couple of conflicts just to point out at the beginning. I am a consultant for several companies that are in the technology arena, and none of which I will be speaking about specifically today, however. In starting out, I would be remiss not to reference the pandemic that we're all emerging from, clearly without dwelling on it much, but I've depicted the stages, the evolution that I think we've all experienced and gone through worldwide in dealing with the pandemic. And now we're at the far right, where we're reinventing ourselves. We're thinking about how life changed in the pandemic, how it affected healthcare specifically, and what the world will look like in the future. So, in addition to the huge human tragedy, the pandemic showed us some important truths about technology. And clearly, technology helped us respond very quickly when life changed during the pandemic. And telehealth is a good example of how that was applied. We definitely demonstrated the capacity to rapidly innovate in our own field and outside. And I would cite the rapid development of vaccines and the migration to the outpatient setting as examples of rapid innovation. But at the same time, I think we also discovered that we couldn't scale quickly enough when faced with major adversity as we were during the pandemic. And so treatment and prevention didn't reach as many people as quickly as possible. So we're left with this notion that there's a tremendous need to innovate in medicine broadly and in orthopedics or musculoskeletal care specifically. And that's what supports the idea that we need an orthopedic moonshot. And I'll elaborate further on that. We seem to be at an important technology inflection point right now. And what I mean by that is that at the same time that we face huge challenges that I outlined, technology and innovation is exploding in fields around medicine and orthopedics. Some would call these adjacencies. In fact, if you look at the telehealth landscape in the United States, it's vast. And I've listed just a few examples here of companies and that are in this space in various areas, telemedicine, monitoring, alarms, et cetera, that you can see here. And also the economic impact of this, or the amount of investment that's flowing into digital health in 2023 is expected to reach pre-pandemic levels on the order of $15 to $25 billion. So in terms of investment and interest, there's huge interest in this topic of technology and healthcare. And the big players are all involved. Interestingly, that collaboration between Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, and JP Morgan has sort of dissolved a little bit and reinventing itself. I think they got a reality check about what it's like to be in healthcare. But other big players like Apple and Google in the United States are full speed ahead with Apple leading the sensor technology and Google wanting to be the source of information for everyone. Those are just two high-profile examples, and there are a host of others. Now the big talk right in our own computers, in our own daily lives, is this notion of chat bots, or one of which is Chat GPT. And in this edition of Orthopedic Insights, they talk about Chat GPT and how that will affect the acquisition of information online, both for providers and for patients. And it's becoming, a competitor for Google and other established sources of information that could increasingly impact how healthcare is provided, how information is acquired by all. So quite interesting. So in short, futurists are telling us that technology will fundamentally change how we do our work. Is this in fact true? This from a report from Elsevier on the clinician of the future notes that the volume of data created, captured, and copied, consumed globally reaches the level of zettabytes, which is a big number. Can't tell you how big, but it's huge, and it's year over year over year asymptotically increased. And most clinicians expect that they will be making decisions using clinical support tools that incorporate artificial intelligence, like the chat bot that I was referring to a moment ago, within the next 10 years, and some already are. And likewise, from the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery, probably our flagship North American journal, machine learning will become critical in the day-to-day operations of orthopedic practice. So it's imperative that providers become accustomed to this and familiar, not only with the terminology, but how it works. So we can't, clearly we can't ignore technology. And I see this right in my own institution happening around me at the University of California, San Francisco. If you look in the box on the right-hand side, the strategic plan specifically incorporates new technology post-pandemic to help accelerate growth. And these include things that will touch on and are touching on orthopedics and musculoskeletal care, including remote monitoring, biometrics, and even genomics, as I'll touch on later, ultimately resulting in predictive analytics that will affect practice. So what are the risks of adopting new technology, and how can we go about doing this effectively and efficiently in musculoskeletal care? Because clearly this is not all blue sky. And this report from the JAMA network raises the point of view that while artificial intelligence has been responsible for some stunning advances and capabilities, the challenge remains converting those predictions about its utility into effective action. Will it really help us make better decisions in a timely fashion? Open question. So if we kind of take a listing of where do we stand with this digital transformation, on the positives, which I've listed above the dotted line there, raising consumer and patient experience and expectations is clearly an output of the digital transformation, and potentially the ability to bring the joy back in medicine. In other words, making information and documentation more easily accessible, simplify it. And with the notion being improving the quality of care. On the negative side, there's this idea of a challenge to really identify the value there. Is it moving the needle on outcome and patient experience? Some of the information out there is outright false. So there are ethical challenges about where information is derived from. And in fact, if it's coming from us individually by groups profiling our personal data, is that appropriate? Is that a misuse of data? And technology is expensive. So can this be an efficient value add, or is it just something that's for the rich and privileged? All open questions. In musculoskeletal care and in orthopedics, the question that I would pose is, are we introducing technology strategically? And I love this picture of the robot flipping an omelet. Incredible technology, this robot, what it is capable of doing. But in the end, it's just flipping an omelet. Hasn't really moved the needle. So kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to say, all right, we make something fancy. Is it really improving our lives? Do we need help flipping the omelet? No, but we do need help with a lot of other things. So how can surgeons and innovators in the musculoskeletal space effectively produce a musculoskeletal moonshot? And by moonshot, I mean something that significantly advances the care we're providing, maybe changes the paradigm of the care that we're providing in the musculoskeletal space. Well, I would say to you, let's take a look at the Silicon Valley model of innovation, a place where many of these familiar names in technology have emerged from. Can we learn something there? Potentially we can. In Silicon Valley, major advances occur, or let's say resources are dedicated to an intersection of huge problems, technology advancements, and application of that technology or radical solutions. So to give you a visual on that, what I'm talking about is this intersection. Think about it as a Venn diagram of a huge problem, radical solution, technology breakthrough, and where there's an overlap, where those things coalesce, that's where the resources, the attention, and the energy should be focused. It has the greatest potential for a significant breakthrough. All right, well, let's apply this to musculoskeletal health. If we're talking about musculoskeletal moonshots, are there huge problems in orthopedics or musculoskeletal care? Absolutely there are, yes. Arthritis and musculoskeletal disability are huge problems, both related to cost and the disability that they create around the world. Musculoskeletal health is linked to systemic disease, diabetes, heart disease, neurologic disorders, and increasingly it's being viewed as reversible and treatable, but high degree of variability of application and opportunity to access those treatments across geographies, ethnicities, races, socioeconomic groups. And in fact, if we look specifically in Japan, here's an interesting article that cites the correlation of musculoskeletal disorders with life expectancy and pointing out that the burden of musculoskeletal health decreases the life expectancy in Japan. All right, next, thinking about our Venn diagram, are there technology advancements that would be relevant to orthopedics? Absolutely there are, and I'm sure many of you in the audience can think of some of those. So I took this from the OrthoEvidence publication on ChatGPT, and to sort of compound things, this is a situation where the chat bot was asked, what are the top trends and innovations in orthopedics? And you can see the listing here: robots, 3D printing, personalized medicine approaches to joint replacement, minimally invasive, regenerative therapies like stem cells, and then other subsets like platelet-rich plasma, sensors and monitoring, artificial intelligence, machine learning, sort of the underpinning of the chatbot, advanced materials, articular materials, ceramics, titanium, virtual reality, and augmented reality. So all of these are incredible technology innovations that are in fields around us where there are some adjacencies. There is no shortage of technology that could potentially be applied in our musculoskeletal world. So finally, to round out our Venn diagram, are radical solutions being proposed in orthopedics? In other words, is there a convergence of that technology with the ability to address one of our or a number of our major problems? And the answer is absolutely yes. And this slide simply shows one view, my view, of the present state on the left and the new state on the right. So this is where technology is addressing huge problems, where we're going from replacement to restoration, from centralized processes to distributed and personalized, from pathways to precision. And you see other things listed here. Best evidence, you go look it up. No, now it's at your fingertips at the point of care. These are radical solutions that are incorporating the technology that we see in the spaces around us. All right, well, if we use this paradigm of the Venn diagram and musculoskeletal moonshots, I'll finish with several predictions for you on what the future may hold in orthopedics with moonshots. Number one, I think it's clear that digitized processes will impact our operations. This is an easy transition from other fields and operations to health. Things like scheduling, supply chain, patient engagement. These digitized processes are happening all around us in other industries, and people are getting used to this and expecting this. So it's very logical and not a stretch to assume that this will happen in musculoskeletal care and improve our processes. Next, thinking about artificial intelligence, I would predict that a digital footprint will begin to inform decisions at the point of care. And I love this, this picture from the Steinberg Foundation showing a person made of a footprint to help illustrate my point. So here's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of information out there, anything from our published literature, our ability to take experience from, say, Medicare data or registries and create calculators and predictors, to motion analysis and sensor input on individual patients, things like imaging for individual patients that can be read with artificial intelligence with increasing accuracy to begin to predict things like infection or implant loosening, as is depicted here, using these inputs of technology from digitized imaging. So what I'm trying to do is begin to paint a picture of information that's available on individuals, from imaging to their personal movement characteristics to the larger body of data that's available on outcome. And what you have then is, through the use of artificial intelligence, the ability to now integrate this information. And it might include other things like laboratory analysis, personal data, social media, or even in its most sophisticated form, genomics, proteomics, things that we might know about a person's individual metabolism or metabolic makeup, in addition to the sensor data that we alluded to before. So something that seems very disparate, but could then come together to create a very comprehensive picture, or a digital fingerprint of an individual that would help predict how interventions and care might be optimized for them. And then finally, robotics has come up frequently. And if we think of the robot as a surgical instrument, in the future, the notion is that the robot will interface with artificial intelligence and become more than just a cutting tool. Rather, it will be a platform for application of the digital footprint. So, or excuse, digital fingerprint, I guess footprint applies too, but the idea being that the robot benefits by information. It's not just cutting the bone. If there's a notion of personalized care, how an implant should be positioned, balanced, sized, et cetera, that would be derived from synthesizing information that the robot would use as a tool to assist a surgeon in undertaking an operation. So I'll finish with a final caveat. I've used this analogy of the musculoskeletal moonshot and Silicon Valley and technology, but I don't believe completely that healthcare and technology are one and the same. Still, as is pointed out here by Bob Wachter and colleagues in JAMA, clinicians, physicians will bear much of the responsibility to broker and work through that relationship between patients, the computer, and the recommendations that they make. So I still have a human perspective on what the future of technology will bring. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present these thoughts and participate in DOCSF in Japan.
Wow, that brings us to the end of DOCSF Japan, the first ever. It was pretty amazing. I thought it was great. What do you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Super exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I love what you said at the beginning, that we need to create a conversation between the companies that are building our future and those of us that will use it, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we can jumpstart this conversation within our Japanese audience. So I want to thank all the speakers, our DOCSF faculty that gave of their time to give us these lectures, which are really insightful. And of course, Christina Portillo, our Director of Operations, for her support. Junichi, to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bini. Now I go speak Japanese. 皆さん本当に今日はありがとうございました。長時間だったと思うんですけども、いろいろ皆さんが何か有意義な情報を得られましたら、私たちもとても幸いに思っております。ぜひ、いろいろとフィードバック、どんなご意見でも構いませんので、気軽に私たちに投げていただけましたら、幸いです。私たちはもうこの単発イベントで終わりにするつもりはありませんので、今後も引き続きいろんなイベントをこのDOCSF JAPANからやっていきたいと思っております。今後も展開も、一緒に何か作り上げていくような関係になれたらいいと思っておりますので、ぜひ今後ともよろしくお願いします。森岡先生、よろしくお願いします。
はい、ありがとうございます。本日は皆様ご参加いただきありがとうございました。そして、改めまして、このDOCSF JAPAN、開催にあたりまして、ご支援いただきました企業様、政府機関の皆様に、心よりお礼を申し上げます。そして、今回の運営メンバー一同、心より感謝を申し上げるとともに、今後ともですね、末永いお力添えをいただき、今後とも何卒よろしくお願いいたします。皆様と何か、新しい形作っていきましょう。今後ともよろしくお願いいたします。
Outstanding. I have several friends in Tokyo and in Japan in general from orthopedics, and I hope they're watching. And I want to say, come join us in San Francisco again. I'd love to come to Japan. I think we all love this interaction. So I think it's arigato. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you both, and see you next time.